ที่ยวแบบใหม่
มีแต่เรื่องให้ Amazing กลัวแดดแรงๆแต่คลื่นก็แรงด้วยนี่ไม่กล้ากินอะไรใหม่ๆรู้อีกที
ไม่เลือก
ร้อยแรง
ต่างกันเล็มน้อยนึงลูก
รักษาระยะห่างแต่ความเท่เนี่ยไม่ห่างกันเลยใส่หน้ากากเข้าหากันแต่รู้ทันนะไม่ยิ้มให้อ่ะช่วยดูแลธรรมชาติดูแลซะงั้นแค่ดูแลกันและกันเพิ่มขึ้นอีกนิดก็ใกล้ชิดความสุขได้ยิ่งกว่าเดิมยิ่งไปยิ่งให้ยิ่งสุขใจกว่าที่เคยเที่ยวเมืองไทย Amazing ยิ่งกว่าเดิม
Welcome to the amazing new chapters of Thailand, where you discover yourself.
Do you believe in the multiverse?
Multiverse?
Where your love begins again. Where nature is calling you.
Mom, I met a new friend.
Write your new chapter in amazing Thailand.
All New Toyota Active นี่แหละรถของเรา
It's time for Thais to encourage each other. Forward the encouragement. Physical and mental strength would lead us to victory. To make Thai people and Thailand stronger. Sports Authority of Thailand.
Let me get it for you. Alright, got it for you. Gonna have some fun. 자 이제 새롭게 다시 시작해. Here we go. See a better version of myself. I'm like a fan. I feel so like 무엇을 원해 뭐든 다 줄게 for sure. Hurry up. I wanna go, just wanna go. Feels like I go back to 7 years old. Yeah, I gotta do it. I'm gonna feel it. I'm gonna do it. Whatever I want.
แมทชีวิตในแบบคุณ All New Toyota Active
Whatever I wanna do.
นี่แหละรถของเรา
ในช่วงวัย 50 ผมยังมีความสุขกับการทำงานและเต็มที่กับการใช้ชีวิตผมสนุกกับความท้าทายใหม่ๆเสมอแล้วไลฟ์สไตล์แบบผมควรเลือกความคุ้มครองแบบไหนสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดคือสุขภาพแข็งแรงแค่ไหนก็เจ็บป่วยได้ที่สำคัญต้องไม่เป็นภาระกับใครหมดกังวลกับค่าห้องและค่ารักษาพยาบาล Elite Health Plus จากเมืองไทยประกันชีวิต
อร่อยเร็วแรงแค่เปิดรหัสมาม่าครับก็รับเด็ด2 กิกจาก True 5G ฟรีทันทีพร้อมลุ้นโชคทองทุกสัปดาห์รวมมูลค่ากว่า 1,300,000 บาทหมดเขต28 กุมภาพันธ์ 2566 อร่อยแรงทั่วไทย
การเป็นที่หนึ่งสำหรับใครๆแล้วอาจมองเป็นเรื่องยากกับบางคนกว่าที่จะเป็นที่หนึ่งนั้น ไม่ใช่แค่ฝึกฝน แต่ต้องฝึกหนักกว่าที่เคยทำมา ทุ่มเทมีร้อยต้องทุ่มจนเป็นล้านเพราะที่หนึ่งไม่ใช่ของเราแต่เป็นของทุกคนคนไทยการกีฬาแห่งประเทศไทยอยู่เคียงข้างทุกเส้นทางของนักกีฬาไทย
โตโยต้า6รุ่นพิเศษฉลองครบรอบ60 ปีจำนวนจำกัด 6,000 คันแตกต่างด้วยสไตล์ขาวมุกหลังคาดำภายในสีทูโทนใหม่พร้อมสัญลักษณ์60 ปีพิเศษยิ่งขึ้นหันยูยูนิคเนสคลิก toyotagreyhunt.com แล้วตามล่ารับฟรีแรปฟิล์มลามิเนตและเกรย์จำนวนจำกัด1คันต่อ1โชว์รูมเท่านั้นเป็นเจ้าของรุ่นนี้รับส่วนลดดอกเบี้ย 0.1% บ็อกเซตและ Apple AirTag พร้อมสะสมคะแนน Alert X พิเศษสุดลุ้นรับรถสปอร์ต GR86 มูลค่ากว่า 2,900,000 บาทวันนี้ถึง31 มกราคม 2566
เที่ยวแบบใหม่
มีแต่เรื่องให้ Amazing กลัวแดดแรงๆแต่คลื่นก็แรงด้วยนี่ไม่กล้ากินอะไรใหม่ๆรู้อีกที
ไม่เลือก
ร้อยแรง
ต่างกันเล่มน้อยนึงลูก
รักษาระยะห่างแต่ความเท่เนี่ยไม่ห่างกันเลยใส่หน้ากากเข้าหากันแต่รู้ทันนะไม่ยิ้มให้อ่ะช่วยดูแลธรรมชาติธรรมชาติดูแลซะงั้นแค่ดูแลกันและกันเพิ่มขึ้นอีกนิดก็ใกล้ชิดความสุขได้ยิ่งกว่าเดิมยิ่งไปยิ่งให้ยิ่งสุขใจกว่าที่เคยเที่ยวเมืองไทย Amazing ยิ่งกว่าเดิม
Here we go.
แมทชีวิตในแบบคุณ All New Toyota Active
นี่แหละรถของเรา
อร่อยเร็วแรงแค่เปิดรหัสมาม่าครับก็รับเด็ด2กิกจาก True 5G ฟรีทันทีพร้อมลุ้นโชคทองทุกสัปดาห์รวมมูลค่ากว่า 1,300,000 บาทหมดเขต28 กุมภาพันธ์ 2566อร่อยแรงทั่วไทย
ชีวิตคุณอร่อยแบบไหนอร่อยในตำนานอร่อยในร้านอร่อยในรถอร่อยในใจเธอทุกรสชาติคือความอร่อยของชีวิตทำทุกวันของชีวิตให้อร่อยไปด้วยกันมาม่าอร่อย
ในช่วงวัย 50 ผมยังมีความสุขกับการทำงานและเต็มที่กับการใช้ชีวิตผมสนุกกับความท้าทายใหม่ๆเสมอแล้วไลฟ์สไตล์แบบผมควรเลือกความคุ้มครองแบบไหนสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดคือสุขภาพแข็งแรงแค่ไหนก็เจ็บป่วยได้ที่สำคัญต้องไม่เป็นภาระกับใครหมดกังวลกับค่าห้องและค่ารักษาพยาบาล Elite Health Plus จากเมืองไทยประกันชีวิต
การเป็นที่หนึ่งสำหรับใครๆแล้วอาจมองเป็นเรื่องยากกับบางคนกว่าที่จะเป็นที่หนึ่งนั้นไม่ใช่แค่ฝึกฝนแต่ต้องฝึกหนักกว่าที่เคยทำมาทุ่มเทมีร้อยต้องทุ่มจนเป็นล้านเพราะที่หนึ่งไม่ใช่ของเราแต่เป็นของทุกคนคนไทยการกีฬาแห่งประเทศไทยอยู่เคียงข้างทุกเส้นทางของนักกีฬาไทย
โตโยต้า6รุ่นพิเศษฉลองครบรอบ60 ปีจำนวนจำกัด 6,000 คันแตกต่างด้วยสไตล์ขาวมุกหลังคาดำภายในสีทูโทนใหม่พร้อมสัญลักษณ์60 ปีพิเศษยิ่งขึ้นหันยูยูนิคเนสคลิก toyotagreyhunt.com แล้วตามล่ารับฟรีแรปฟิล์มลามิเนตและเกรย์จำนวนจำกัด1คันต่อ1โชว์รูมเท่านั้นเป็นเจ้าของรุ่นนี้รับส่วนลดดอกเบี้ย 0.1% บ็อกเซตและ Apple AirTag พร้อมสะสมคะแนน Alert X พิเศษสุดลุ้นรับรถสปอร์ต GR86 มูลค่ากว่า 2,900,000 บาทวันนี้ถึง31 มกราคม 2566
เที่ยวแบบใหม่
มีแต่เรื่องให้ Amazing กลัวแดดแรงๆแต่คลื่นก็แรงด้วยนี่ไม่กล้ากินอะไรใหม่ๆรู้อีกที
ไม่เลือก
ร้อยแรง รักษาระยะห่างแต่ความเท่เนี่ยไม่ห่างกันเลยใส่หน้ากากเข้าหากันแต่รู้ทันนะไม่ยิ้มให้อ่ะช่วยดูแลธรรมชาติดูแลซะงั้นแค่ดูแลกันและกันเพิ่มขึ้นอีกนิดก็ใกล้ชิดความสุขได้ยิ่งกว่าเดิมยิ่งไปยิ่งให้ยิ่งสุขใจกว่าที่เคยเที่ยวเมืองไทย Amazing ยิ่งกว่าเดิม
Here we go. See a better version of myself. I'm like a fan. Feel so like who wasn't what I wanted.
แมทชีวิตในแบบคุณ All New Toyota Active
นี่แหละรถของเรา
อร่อยเร็วแรงแค่เปิดรหัสมาม่าครับก็รับเด็ด2กิกจาก True 5G ฟรีทันทีพร้อมลุ้นโชคทองทุกสัปดาห์รวมมูลค่ากว่า 1,300,000 บาทหมดเขต28 กุมภาพันธ์ 2566อร่อยแรงทั่วไทย
ชีวิตคุณอร่อยแบบไหนอร่อยในตำนานอร่อยในร้านอร่อยในรถอร่อยในใจเธอทุกรสชาติคือความอร่อยของชีวิตทำทุกวันของชีวิตให้อร่อยไปด้วยกันมาม่าอร่อย
ในช่วงวัย 50 ผมยังมีความสุขกับการทำงานและเต็มที่กับการใช้ชีวิตผมสนุกกับความท้าทายใหม่ๆเสมอแล้วไลฟ์สไตล์แบบผมควรเลือกความคุ้มครองแบบไหนสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดคือสุขภาพแข็งแรงแค่ไหนก็เจ็บป่วยได้ที่สำคัญต้องไม่เป็นภาระกับใครหมดกังวลกับค่าห้องและค่ารักษาพยาบาล Elite Health Plus จากเมืองไทยประกันชีวิต
การเป็นที่หนึ่งสำหรับใครๆแล้วอาจมองเป็นเรื่องยากกับบางคนกว่าที่จะเป็นที่หนึ่งนั้นไม่ใช่แค่ฝึกฝนแต่ต้องฝึกหนักกว่าที่เคยทำมาทุ่มเทมีร้อยต้องทุ่มจนเป็นล้านเพราะที่หนึ่งไม่ใช่ของเราแต่เป็นของทุกคนคนไทยการกีฬาแห่งประเทศไทยอยู่เคียงข้างทุกเส้นทางของนักกีฬาไทย
All right, good morning. Welcome back. Thanks for staying the distance. The final lap is about to get underway. And what a 2 days it's been already. And I have no doubt that it's going to be a fantastic day today. And whilst obviously the crowd has dwindled somewhat, people have had to get on flights and whatever, I'm absolutely amazed. I was talking to Alessio at breakfast this morning. We've already had over 4,000 views of the first session on the YouTube channel. So this is being streamed live. And it's wonderful that we can be taking this amazing content around the world. So if you've got people that might not be aware of the conference, point them towards the YouTube channel. We've been putting it out in the chat and on email and so on, but we'd obviously love, the whole objective here is really to share as much knowledge as possible. And I just realized as I was preparing, I've come up here and introduced every day, and not once remiss of me have I mentioned our theme for the whole conference, which is the next normal, reimagining the world of running and mass participation. And I think we've got plenty of insights already in terms of how we might be able to reimagine the way forward. There were so many amazing takeouts and occurrences yesterday, so I just wanted to, as I did yesterday, start with a quick recap of some of the key points that I picked up. Obviously, so special to have the Prime Minister of Thailand here to come to the session. I mean, I've been in this industry for 35 years. I've had many ministers participate in events, but I don't think I've ever had a Prime Minister at an event, so absolutely wonderful experience. Obviously, Seb Coe joining us in that recorded message. Great to have him along. One of the things that really stood out for me was one of the comments that Tom from Parkrun made in his first session at the beginning of the day. He posed the question, what else are we wrong about? What else are we wrong about? And I think that that's something great to take away. With sometimes we just make these assumptions and we just keep rolling year after year after year, and sometimes just taking a step back and looking in the mirror and saying, what are we wrong about? And having the vulnerability, and that came up in Mike's session, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, for being prepared to be vulnerable, to say, you know what, we've made a mistake and that's okay. Sometimes we learn from those mistakes. What are the problems that we're facing in a vulnerable way? We heard from Prof. Gurginov, and he shared some of the insights from his book about the amazing impact that this industry makes, and his comment that impact is an end product that is planned and delivered. It doesn't just kind of happen completely by accident. I think some of it in this industry does almost happen by accident. We're not so aware of it, or we're not setting out to be aware of it. But I think there's opportunity to say, what is the impact that we're trying to create, and then plan it and be able to deliver it. I personally loved the session, obviously, with Mike talking about the power of purpose, and that came up when I wrapped up the end of the day. I think it was Jan, that was one of his key takeaways, the power of purpose, and in terms of Mike and Chicago Event Management's purpose, fearlessly expanding the boundaries of human potential. And I think, for me, that kind of came through also in this infinite game, the Simon Sinek phrase, that there's never a finish line. Every event is another way to improve and express ourselves. And as we move into this next phase of our industry, have we maybe got kind of caught up that we've been so focused on the start line and the finish line that we kind of relax when we get to that finish line? And have we been in this kind of state of relax before COVID came and woke us up to say, we're not at a finish line? It's this infinite game where we constantly have this opportunity to challenge ourselves and improve what we're doing for an industry, and what we're doing for the people that we're impacting. And again, that point I want to reinforce, that willingness to be vulnerable, to say, okay, we might not have it right, let's be vulnerable and explore that, rather than just kind of constantly try and ignore it or sweep it under the carpet. And Dawna Stone reinforced that in my chat with her. One of my key takeaways from that was not being scared to change. Not being scared to change. I think this kind of fear of, we've always done it like this, what's it going to be like if we change it, might be impeding us in some way. So let's get rid of that fear of change in as many ways as possible. I love the presentation from Vivek Singh, and there was one thing that really stood out for me there, and I've spoken about it many times, is this kind of level playing field that we create, which doesn't happen in many other sports. You have the elites, you have the 10th richest person in the world running with a street kid. What other sports give those opportunities to be able to create that? And are we really harnessing them, and are we weaving those into the narrative? Are we telling the story as well as we could be? And again, on a similar level, the world champs for everyday runners, that opportunity in Riga for everyday participants to be involved in a world championships. And then the announcement from Mark Hurst that it was just decided at the council meeting last week in Rome that the World Road Running Championships will be on an annual basis. What a great opportunity that presents to expose this amazing sport to so many more people. Alessio chaired the panel, which was just before the Prime Minister arrived, on what it means to be a runner, and there were many different definitions there. The values of belonging, togetherness, achievement, discipline, empathy, improving one's health, and community. And those last two were, to me, have been two of the real themes that have come out of here. What's the community that we're building, and are we missing an opportunity around health and well-being, perhaps, that we can harness and leverage more? Then we had that wonderful session after lunch around particular events, the marathon, the opportunity to showcase a city. We spoke about the course. We had the case studies of Vienna, and one of my challenges doing this role is that I don't always get to be able to sit in the audience and listen to everything, and sometimes I'm pre-planning the next session, and I heard that music in the background from Vienna. Thank you, Kristen, and that was just one. Oh, Catherine, I mean, this opportunity that every event can showcase the city that it comes through in a different way. We had Istanbul, the opportunity that Sarah shared of running from Asia to Europe, their own particular element, and they have a world record half marathon, but they have a marathon which is all about showcasing those amazing elements of Istanbul. And then we ended up with Sotiris talking about Athens, about Athens and the amazing elements of Athens. And Dave Cundy got into that debate around it, it not being eligible for a world record because of the parameters that are in place. Maybe there's an opportunity to explore that more, but as unlikely as it might be for a world record to be there. How is it possible that one of the founding marathons can't be recognized if a record's made there, which was the point that Dave was making. And I think, for me, there were so many great things in all of those course ones, but one of the most pertinent comments for me was from Nori in terms of what's the objective that we're trying to achieve here? Start with the end in mind. And I wanted to leave that as a segue into potentially a lens. So he was talking about when you design that course, what are you trying to achieve? If you're trying to achieve a world record or a national record, that's okay. But maybe it's an opportunity over here to create an experience, to showcase the city, to build community in different areas like we heard from Mike with the new half marathon that they created in Chicago. But being very clear of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And before I go to the next session and finish that wrap, I'm wondering if that's a useful lens for you to have as we go into today's session, which is going to be very powerful. Get some clarity. What is our objective as an industry? And are you clear in terms of what your objective of your event or your business might be? Obviously, financial survival and stability in these challenging times is one of those, but it can potentially go far further than that when you look at it through maybe a purpose lens and other areas. So what is our objective as an industry? So then just some housekeeping. I got you all running yesterday. I'm not going to get you to do that today. But a big thanks again to MyLaps for the MyLaps morning run, and to mention that those of you that ran, iRewind was doing the videos. Those have now been uploaded, your personalized video, which is a fantastic little snippet of what iRewind provides. And those are now on the MPW website, massparticipationsworld.com/MyLaps run, I think is correct, but you'll find it on the website. As always, these things can't happen without the support of our partners. So an acknowledgement of our local partners, Tourism Authority of Thailand, the National Sports Development Fund, NSDF, Amazing Thailand, Toyota, Tri-League, our local partner here, and it's Tom's birthday today, so very happy birthday to Tom. We've barely seen him because he's been coordinating that Prime Minister's visit and now getting ready for the marathon tomorrow. Amazing Thailand Marathon Bangkok, as I mentioned. Our official partners, Marathon Photo, our official photography partner, Nuco, our registration partner, iRewind, the video partner I've just mentioned, MyLaps, ASICS, GSIC, TrackX and ASN, and our official supporters, World's Marathons, Haku, and I see Jackie in the front row here, Picture Board Partners, Grow on Purpose, and Pika, and I think Claudio's in the back there. So a quick reminder, if you haven't already, and I'm fairly certain that all of you have, if you haven't accessed the conference app, I've been getting so much great feedback on that, so if you're not using it, jump on, and it's as simple as going to either the Play Store or the iStore, download Hova, W-H-O-V-A, put in your email address, and you can access a lot of the content. We mentioned yesterday, and I know a number of people took advantage of it, Coffee with Caroline. So Caroline brings vast experience from her many roles in sport, including the Global Head of Sponsorship for Standard Chartered Bank. She's sitting here in the very front, if you haven't met her, with the bright, pink is the right color? Yep, color shirt. And Caroline's very happy to spend 15 or 20 minutes with you talking about your marketing and sponsorship strategy. Use, please, the hashtag WAGRCMPW22 in any of the photos you're posting. And as we move on to photos, we had the pleasure of photos for 2 days from Marathon Photos. We passed the baton on to Claudio and his team from Pika today. So Pika, I have a QR code here. Claudio, just stand up there so people can come and find you if they need you. But essentially, download the Get Pika, so that's GETPICA app. sign up or log in for the first time, enter the code WAGRC 2022. And then take a selfie. And that doesn't mean that you can't access the marathon photos. So what we now have on the app, day 1, day 2, day 3. So the photos from the marathon photo guys are still up there, and then you'll get a peaker experience today. Reminder that we are recording and taking photos of everything for marketing purposes. And again, don't forget to go and visit the expo at the back there during the breaks that we have. We've got booths there from Marathon Photo, Haku, TrackX, MyLapse, ASN, World's Marathon, and of course Pika as well. Meals again in the back, so maybe grab your meal and go for a wander through the expo. And then the opportunity, which I've mentioned, and I know a number of people have taken up already, to participate in the race tomorrow. If you haven't registered and want to, go and see the group over at the registration desk and they'll get you registered. There's a 5K, 10K, half marathon and a full marathon. I'd like to invite Alessio to come and join me on the stage, because as we all know at these events, it's great and we have this wonderful opportunity to be out front here, Alessio and myself, but these things don't happen without the support of an incredible team behind us. And there's an amazing team that's been working on this event, and I just want to acknowledge them. We just want to acknowledge them. So firstly, the Tri-League team, of course, Tom and Ben, who we've mentioned already, and this amazing team that literally came onto this project about a week ago, and that is Duan, Benny, Kik and Om, who are in the back there probably still working away. The incredible production team at the back there, the production qualities that we've had across here, as you mentioned, 4,000 people watching it on the YouTube channel and counting, and we have all of that content, and it's no easy feat to pull off these kind of production values that we've got here today. My team, the MPW team, my amazing wife Tet, who eats and sleeps and breathes this with me whether she likes it or not. And then a wonderful story, and we've spoken about the narratives and the impact that we as an industry can create. Some of you would have met Mon. Mon works for us based out of the Philippines, and this has been his first ever trip out of the Philippines to come and be part of this conference here in Bangkok. And he had an experience where he was supposed to go home yesterday, and unfortunately the trains took longer than expected and he missed his flight. And we are absolutely delighted that he is back with us today. But what I'm sharing is that there are always these narratives behind the story, and as an industry we can make the impact on so many people's lives. And then Sean, and there's a story behind that as well. Sean in the production booth there has been delivering this event since 2015, the very first mass participation Asia. He no longer works for me, and again, that story we spoke about with Mike yesterday, how often your staff move on and the boomerang brings them back. I picked up the phone to Sean about 10 days ago. I said, you know, I'd love to have your calmness helping us in the production booth, driving the decks, and here he is with us, and we've had a pretty seamless production with him, working with them. And then you'd like to talk about the World Athletics team.
Yes, I would like.
A mic there. No.
Yeah, I would like to thank Benjamin Hu, who's worked tirelessly on this project alongside me, Jakob for the support, and you for what you have accomplished, for what we have done together. It's really, I'm not only grateful to have you as a business partner, but also as a friend. Thank you for the ride.
Pleasure.
And let's have a great day today.
Thanks, Alessio. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, and it certainly is about partnership, and it's been absolutely wonderful working with all of this team and Alessio. Okay, so let's move on to some of the wonderful sessions that we have ahead of us today, and we start by inviting up onto the stage Prof. Jeroen Schrieder. He's the head policy in sports and physical activity at KU Leuven, and his presentation is making cities fit for runners. Runners' profiles versus pro-running policies. Please welcome Prof. Jeroen Schrieder. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, good morning, Bangkok. Hello to everyone. Hope you are enjoying the conference and this beautiful city as much as I do. And of course, thanks to Chris, thanks to Alessio for the wonderful conference, for the wonderful invitation, for the work you are doing for the world of running. You're doing a great job, absolutely. I have to apologize maybe a little bit that I'm an academic. Sorry for that. But academics are said to maybe know a lot of a few things, whereas you, being practitioners in the field, are said to know a little of many things. Up to you to decide who is in the best position. I'm affiliated to the KU Leuven. It's a university in Belgium, in Leuven, as a professor in the fields of sport management and sport sociology. I still do like it, but I also like to participate in running as well. But I have to admit that I switched from long-distance running towards triathlon. Again, my apologies. But maybe it's a first lesson for you. When we do studies among distance runners, but also among triathlon athletes, it seems that the latter have begun their career, being it as a lead sporter or a non-competitive participant, that they switched from running towards triathlon for medical reasons, for social reasons, etc. So maybe keep that in mind already. Making cities fit for runners. Well, here is the outline. I will guide you a little bit. Why should we talk about cities? Why are they important for the world of running? What about running? Its developments, its popularity? Well, as I said, I'm a professor, and professors have to deal with numbers. So I will present you quite a lot of numbers. Who are the runners today? What do they prefer? And what about the running organizers? What is the role of public governments? And I will end with running events and, most of all, their public value. So first of all, why cities? The city, public places and public spheres in general, maybe not always or not necessarily are a friendly setting for sports people. You're not allowed to walk or to bike or to make use of other non-motorized or motorized instruments, or even activities, physical activities that are more close to sports, skating, using as a step, inline skating, not allowed, but also swimming when it is possible, or scuba diving, ice skating, fishing, sports fishing, not allowed, and also, yes, football and a lot of team sports, basketball and volleyball, for instance, and even running. So it seems that the city is not a welcome place or very much welcoming people that do like running. Sports sometimes is not allowed. Imagine, here are some pictures from my country, and maybe it's not a real advertisement for the country, but anyway, imagine to be in Brussels one day and that you want to visit the city while running or cycling. Well, you have to come about some obstacles like this. Many obstacles for cyclists and runners. So is the city really a place to be for sports people? By the way, the picture on the bottom at the left is taken in front of the Institution for Safety in Traffic. So why cities? Well, as we all know, in the industrialized cities, even more than 75% of the people live in these urbanized settings. And in non-industrialized countries, 50% or even more. So this might be an opportunity. Rolly, go on with the Congo River Marathon. It will be a success in Kinshasa within 10 years, maybe. The political impact of cities. Cities are small enough to safeguard the democratic process. And if cities do cooperate, they are big enough to govern at a local scale. And when it comes to health-related issues, which is, I think, a very important topic to all of us, well, nations and even supranations like, for instance, the European Union and other institutions worldwide, they face big problems in fighting against smoking, obesity, mobility, etc. Those are real problems of today. And I think cities are in a very good position to deal with these issues because they are on a smaller scale, they are in direct contact with citizens, and they act local while thinking globally. Cities also have a policy impact. Nations were at stake during the 19th and 20th century, but they created boundaries. Whereas in the 21st century, it will be the century of cities. Cities create bridges. Do you see the difference? Boundaries versus cities. And talking about bridging, linking, well, think for instance of the Middle Ages. This still exists, these paths, these pilgrimage routes and itineraries. They link cities by walking or even running from the north of Europe to the south to the city of Santiago de Compostela. And most of these paces of these paths still exist or are to be rediscovered. Or think about what was Chris already referring to, the Marathon of Istanbul, linking, bridging literally two parts of the city and even two continents. Or the Ropa Run, Europe Run, Ropa Run, or a rope, because a rope is an instrument that links links to cities, for instance, or to places, to things. From Paris to Rotterdam, from Hamburg to Rotterdam, many examples. Or think of this one, the World Run, where people at the very same day, at the very same time, do run all over the world for social purposes, because they run until they can't for those who can't. Some developments, and here I am with some figures, some data about running. And first of all, of course, I make use of this platform to point your attention to the book, the new book, my colleague and dear friend, Professor Vasil Girginov, together with Professor Kostas Alexandris, we published a new book on running. It should be of interest to all of you. If you want to have more information, there are flyers around to have more insight into the topic of it. Running events, policies, marketing, and impacts. So for most of the data I will present to you, I will rely on that book, one specific chapter, chapter 2, but also on a book that I presented with other colleagues some years ago on running across Europe. And maybe this is the most important picture, graphic if you want. It's about participating in marathons and the number of marathons. And we may be quite lucky that we have this data. Of course, a marathon is a standardized distance and it's quite easy to make comparisons. And we have data from the 60s up to present. And what we see is that by means of this data, we can easily discern a first wave and a second wave of running. A first wave starting at the end of the 60s, during the 70s, 80s, to go on, and a second wave starting at the end of the 90s. And there will be a third wave, I will tell about that later on. So we see amazing figures, amazing data about the number of marathons and people participating in it. Also, when we have a close look at the evolution of the number of marathon events with over 1,000 finishers and the number of finishers at the 20 largest marathons, it concerns worldwide data from, again, the 60s up to present, we can see that a first and a second wave can be detected. So a first and a second wave, and I'm not going to go into detail for this table too much, but what you have to keep in mind is that the first wave is about baby boomers. You know this generation. This generation questioned the established authority systems. So that is why they can be related to the Cultural Revolution. They're called the yuppies. Do you remember? The young urban people living in cities and then very professional ones, but also like to run on the road for the first time and no longer in stadiums. And the second wave, again starting at the late 90s and continuing at the beginning of the century, is populated or very much liked or created by busters, the baby busters or the Generation X. Values like diversity, self-reliance and informality do prevail within this generation. So, and that is why they can be related to the social revolution. Cities are very much at stake for this generation. They are called joggers, racers, later on. They do like the city and they participate, they do like the running in so-called light running communities. Chris was already referring to these communities. Well, here you are. I will come back later on with regard to the third wave. But a first wave, a second wave, but of course you can imagine if numbers are increasing in terms of the number of participants and the number of events, that after a while the ratio finishers versus marathon is dwindling. So nowadays no longer more than 600 people are participating on average in a marathon, but it's about 450. This is one of the consequences, of course, of being popular. There are, the supply is there, but of course ratios will follow. Look at this, we are in Asia, we are in Bangkok, and look what the role, the position is of Asia. What I calculated right here is the share of marathon arrivals, and look at this, Asia is on top of it. Almost 40% is in the hands of this continent nowadays when it comes to arrivals at marathons worldwide. Or even the share of marathon events, it's still on the rise, it still has potential, 14%, but it was only 5% at the beginning of the 80s. And there is quite potential in this continent. As we have a look at the population figures, we see that almost 60% of the population, of the world population, lives in Asia, so still potential, demographic potential to go. Also other figures, data from other countries, the US, Japan, for instance, still numbers in terms of participants and events, and also from my country, Belgium, or more precisely the northern part of it, Flanders. We can detect a first and a second wave. Let's now delve into the profiles of runners. And first of all, and it will not be a secret, but I'm here to present you some figures we have. Well, if we outline the runners according to age and gender characteristics, it's clear that from a study from World Athletics that event runners have never been older. So we are reaching out to an older public. The average age changed from 35 years in 86 to 39 years in 2018. So the age is growing. Females have significantly increased their position. Look at these figures, the graphics I present right here. At the right side, you see for marathon finishers, the evolution of male-female ratios for marathon participation in different countries. And what is worth to mention is that nowadays, for every single female marathon participant, there are only, between brackets, 10 male participants. But you have to know, you have to keep in mind that the situation was totally different many years ago. Or another example, when we look at the numbers of the evolution of the number of female finishers at the Brussels 20-kilometer race. And we have data collected from the beginning of the 80s up to 2022, so very recently. And you see a grow again in the share of female participants. Up to now, 35% of the participants are female. Nevertheless, gender differences still exist. Women dominate in short distances, meaning less than 5-kilometer races. Men, on the other hand, prevail in longer distances. Older people, females entering this running scene, among others, so it means, has as a consequence, that the average speed is also lowering. Slow, one could say, is the new fast. Yeah? Or, in other words, the fun is in the back of the pack. And I will not go too much into detail with regard to this data, but it means that indeed the speed at events, at running events, is lowering. This is one of the consequences, of course, also from a practical and organizational perspective, because the race is taking much more time. Data from Antwerp, 10 miles, and Brussels, 20 kilometers. Always the same pattern. It used to be a very fast population running, participating. Nowadays, it's a different picture. So that brings me to the third wave of runners. Nowadays, we have a third wave of running. And this wave is populated, let's say, by bridgers instead of the baby boomers or the baby busters. A long time ago, let's say, nowadays we have the bridgers or the digital natives, the YOLOs they are called. You only live once, it said. They are raised in a digital, media-saturated world full of physical sensations and experiences, and challenges, of course. And this might be of very much interest to us. However, despite, let's say, the birth of the third wave of running, a democratized pattern is not yet to happen. Look at this. This is one of our scientific results, productions, if you want, the so-called social status pyramid of sports participation. According to the social professional status of people participating in sport, we can make a differentiation between different sports. The democratized sports are represented in blue, among others, football and martial arts. They succeed to reach out to different layers, different social layers in society. On top of this pyramid are the upper class sports, among which skiing, golf. At the bottom of the pyramid, the so-called lower class sports are to be situated, among which mountain biking, dance, and also road cycling. And running is to be called a upper middle class sport, still. And this upper middle class generation or population maybe can be better identified as being an active class people, for which self-discipline and health, here you are again, are very much at stake. And you see that we have two running figures over there, a black one and a gray one. The black one is to represent the runner who is part of a club, so club organized running, whereas the figure in gray is to be called a light runner, so without no obligation, without no affiliation to a certain club. And look what's happening in this pyramid. You noticed already, the figure in gray is much more to be situated as a democratized sports activity. So we reach out to different social layers when people are not affiliated to a sports club. New running segments, so also new motives. What it is about is that people are looking for nice running experiences instead of only striving for individual physical achievements. It's no longer only about the competition-driven athletes and runners, but it is as well and much more about the experience-oriented racers and joggers. And of course, there is the importance of excitement, physically, socially, and socializing. So running has a really strong contribution to social capital, one may say. And this brings me to the importance to the role of so-called light running communities. Light running communities in which people participate without any obligation. Almost 60% of the event runners nowadays has no club membership. Maybe during youth time they once participated in athletics, track and field, but nowadays there are no obligations to participate in a club for a year or more. And 65% comes out of our study of the event runners prefer urban running events, cities. Do you remember? Urban running events, city runs, but also urban trails and local joggings. They're on top of the list, followed by more nature-related running events like obstacle runs, for instance, and trails, only reaching out to 30% of the population of event runners. That brings me shortly to almost the end of my presentation, city running events and public value. My dear friend and Professor Giganov also referred to it, to the issue of public value. When we are talking about public value, it is about public authorities, let's say cities, that have a mandate to promote a healthy lifestyle among their citizens. And this is very important. Well, running events have the potential to contribute, we all know, to health-related and social benefits. So it should not, and it is not only about running for its own or economic sake, but it should be, and it is primarily about running for the greater good. So it is about creating public value, and we do this through the promotion of physical activity, running being one of the most popular physical activities worldwide, as we know, and a contribution to social integration and social cohesion. Those things are at stake nowadays for public authorities, so it should be of importance to you as well. And as a kind of conclusion, the title of my presentation was Making Cities Fit for Runners? ? Well, I'm convinced it is, since cities have the potential to make runners fit and to keep them fit. Nowadays, and I don't have to convince you, but my statement would be that cities do run the world, and the world of runners is to cities. I thank you for your attention.
Very much. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Jerome. Thank you. Thank you.
If there are any questions, please feel free.
Sorry, do you have a conclusion and Q&A? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for an amazing presentation, and indeed, it's a power in the cities. My question is regarding 1960s. You showed some data that was the time when there was the first decline of the first wave. Do you know what happens and how did they manage to overcome the decline of the first wave, and how did they get to second wave? I'm asking this because, you know, we might need this information to improve our chances of the third wave. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the good question. Well, there is an amazing development from the 60s, 70s towards the 90s, as I tried to identify. Well, in terms of numbers, of course, but also if you have a look at the social characteristics. From the 90s on, females, older people entered the world of running, and that might cause a shift in terms of motives, but also how you are to organize a running event, of course, because at the time, at the late 60s, at the very beginning of public running, it was about starting at one point and finishing at the other, without taking into account any passion or pleasure elements. I think that's the main difference. That was what we started in the 90s, when we reached out to other peoples. Running may be called one of the most important social movements, among others, for females. Yeah? So that is the shift that took place. New segments, but also new ways of organizing, getting things done in the world of running. Please.
Hi, thank you for that extremely insightful presentation. You mentioned that running events are losing participants to triathlons. Could you give a little bit more detail behind that and as to why that's happening?
Yeah. Well, I'm somewhat an expert in this field because I'm practicing in triathlon nowadays. And the reason why, just on a personal basis, is due to my knees. I'm not a medicine, I'm not an expert in that field, but I know if I keep on running only, that might cause extra problems. And I can imagine for many people, I know from many people in my family and among friends, that this is one of the reasons why they shifted towards another physical activity, but including running. Yeah? And if I refer to the scientific part of it, again, when I have a look at who is participating in triathlon nowadays, most of the participants come from the world of athletics or running, but shifted because of medical reasons, but also because of the passion, because of challenges that may be more included in this new physical activity. So it is not an alarm, it's not to say we should stop running, of course not, but maybe we can pick some cherries from that cake from the world of triathlon. What do I mean? They are experts, although on a lower basis in terms of the numbers they reach out, but they are experts in creating a scene, in having a setting that is very attractive. Well, of course, running, and city running in particular, has this potential as well, but there may be some elements from triathlon that might be of use, that might be of interest to running as well. Yeah,
yeah, sorry. Yeah, my question is talk about like the authority have to mandate to make the cities fit for runners. Like in that case, like the authority themselves, should they be like into running or sport to make those decisions? Because yesterday there was a discussion, a panel here where they're talking an example like for Vienna, like it's a history like. Since the 19th century, like the city already know like that history for runners. There are places where it has been there for centuries. Like in the countries in Africa where cities are changing, and then we had as well another panel here where you say like marathon routes are like the people are measuring it, that they are always coming back to change the routes, because I think the cities are changing are not like in Europe where the city is historically being the same. So in the case of Africa, what should be the approach to make those cities fit for runners or for sport in general?
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Rolly, for the good question again. I should say, why not have these obstacles included in your event? No, seriously. Of course, running should be in the hands first of the governing bodies, being World Athletics, being the federations, the national federations, the athletic clubs around. But as we mentioned already many years ago in a publication, we should not miss the next boat of running. This was definitely the case in the 80s. This was definitely the case also in the 90s, that running federations were not concerned with running on the streets. They felt like, yeah, this is not part of the business. Yeah? I saw it in my country, I saw it in many countries in Europe and around. So it should definitely be kept in the hands of governing bodies, being World Athletics, etc. But, and that was what I tried to mention and to focus on, public authorities, of course, have an obligation. They do have a more a mandate, indeed, for taking into account, for being concerned with public health, the health of everyone. Yeah? So the combination of one and one, maybe this doesn't sound too scientific, but 1 and 1 could be 3, by combining the forces of the world of athletics with the concerns, the profits made or created by authorities, because they have the obligation to be concerned about public health, the health situation of their citizens. So it's about ownership, definitely, but I'm not convinced that the world of running, the governing running bodies, can do it on their own. They need the government, but they should open their eyes more and more, and I'm not here to convince you, but maybe other federations, they should open to a wider public, because there is much to gain in this world of running.
All right, Jaron, I think we are running out of time,
Yep.
but now may I have a big round of applause for Jaron? And of course, he will be around here to answer all your questions because he will be around for today. So please keep in touch with him and you can always ask him more and more questions. And next, before we moving to the next interview that will talk about the social and governance dimensions of sustainability and how do this apply to mass participation sport events. Before the speaker ready, let us give them a few minutes and we enjoy the video.
Like we are ready for the show. Going
All New Toyota Yaris Active Modelista บนเส้นทางที่แตกต่างกับไลฟ์สไตล์ที่เป็นตัวเองและความโดดเด่นที่เป็นเราแรงบันดาลใจล่าสุดจากโตเกียว Trend Leader on the Road All New Toyota Yaris Active Modelista
นี่แหละรถของเรา
Let me get it for you. Alright, got it for you. Gonna have some fun. 자, 이제 새롭게 다시 시작해. Here we go.
แมทชีวิตในแบบคุณ All New Toyota Active
นี่แหละรถของเรา
เที่ยวแบบใหม่
มีแต่เรื่องให้ Amazing กลัวแดดแรงๆแต่คลื่นก็แรงด้วยนี่ไม่กล้ากินอะไรใหม่ๆรู้อีกทีไม่เลือกร้อยแรง
ต่างกันเล่มน้อยนึงลูก
รักษาระยะห่างแต่ความเท่เนี่ยไม่ห่างกันเลยใส่หน้ากากเข้าหากันแต่รู้ทันนะไม่ยิ้มให้อ่ะช่วยดูแลธรรมชาติธรรมชาติดูแลซะงั้นแค่ดูแลกันและกันเพิ่มขึ้นอีกนิดก็ใกล้ชิดความสุขได้ยิ่งกว่าเดิมยิ่งไปยิ่งให้ยิ่งสุขใจกว่าที่เคยเที่ยวเมืองไทย Amazing ยิ่งกว่าเดิม
It's time for Thais to encourage each other. Forward the encouragement. Physical and mental strength would lead us to victory. To make Thai people and Thailand stronger. Sports Authority of Thailand.
That's right. And may I remind you, tomorrow we will have amazing Thailand Marathon Bangkok. If you would like to join us, please register at the booth before 12 o'clock. So please feel free to join us with a Bangkok Marathon. It will be a big one, and you will see how we organize the marathon in Thailand. And it might inspire you to give inspiration to create a next marathon in your city, or maybe you decide to do a marathon in Bangkok again. And next we will have the interview that will be the social and governance dimension of sustainability. How do this apply to mass participation sporting events? And please welcome Vasil Gogunov, Professor of Sport Management and Development, President of European Association of Sport Management, and also the interviewer Novana Vukasinovi, Partnership and Communication Specialist from Green Sport Hub in Europe. Can I have a big round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, welcome, Professor. It's really a great pleasure to share this coffee with you. This is how I've been told by Alessio, that we will be having a coffee together.
Yeah, okay.
But there is no coffee.
Oh, it's very disappointing, I'm afraid. We'll have to do something about this.
Well, and it is indeed a great pleasure to be here with you, and thank you very much for a great hospitality and a lovely organization. I have with me today, as we heard, Dr. Vasil Girginov, a professor in sports management and development at Brunel University of London, but also visiting professor at the Russian International Olympic University, the University of Johannesburg, and UQ Leuven. As we heard, you are also president at the European Association of Sport Management. And I would also say from your yesterday's speech and from what we can Google when we Google you, that you are on the speed dial of different sports associations and federations when it comes to the topics of societal sustainability, social impact, legacy. So as we are having a coffee, what would be the key to most memorable experiences you've had that you would like to share with the audiences?
Well, thank you for your introduction. I'm afraid the introduction seems to be longer than the actual presentation, which tells something about the age of the person, actually. When you start accomplishing a number of accolades, or add a number of accolades to your name, it usually happens at the expense of your age. But it's a very great question, and I can answer this question straight away. Because both personally and professionally, as an academic, I was absolutely fascinated by the relationship that was established between the British Society and the Olympic Games around the London Olympics in 2012. And you will remember that at the time, the head of the president of the World Athletics, Sebastian Coe, was the head of the organizing committee. And although there have been a number of deliberations whether Britain should bid to host the Olympics or not, eventually it got the support of the then Labour government. And they succeeded in winning the bid in their session in Singapore. And you know what was the first thing when Seb Coe and Mike woke up on the next day after the champagne and everything to celebrate? The first thing that they said to each other was, excuse my French, shit, now we have to deliver. So, and this is where the interesting part of my answer of the story comes into the picture. So the London bid for the Olympics was based not only on a promise that we're going to deliver great games, but what we're going to do for the Olympic movement. So you give us the right to host the event, but what is this we're going to do in order to reciprocate, to enhance the Olympic movement? And to that end, the British government said, okay, folks, we are going to need, I mean, of course, originally they estimated the cost of the Games to be around £2 billion. It ended up being £12 billion. And we know the story happens every time. But they said to the society, okay, we're going to invest £10 billion of public money, but in exchange, we're going to deliver 5 substantial promises. We're going to make the country more open, more democratic. We're going to enhance business. We're going to promote voluntarism. We're going to establish a world-class sport system. And that was a promise that was put forward to the society in 2007. And then they realized that the full name of the Games was the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And 2 years later, they published a strategy, a promise for the Paralympic sport. To cut the long story short, and to relate the answer to sustainability, so it was not that the exchange that was established between the state and society, but also they put in place a measuring system, a tool, which was called meta-evaluation. This was for the first time in the history of sport and the Olympic Games when a national government, host government, has committed to monitor very closely the impact, the overall impact and the legacy of the Olympic Games. And this was successfully concluded. So to me, this was probably the most interesting part, whereby for the first time in the history of major sporting events, a national government has committed to use sport in order to advance a number of good social causes and to report back to society and to justify the public spending.
And now knowing this, I'm curious to understand what they've done with this data.
Well, this data, of course, was published. It's available freely online. You can Google it. If you just put meta-evaluation of the London Games, you can see the whole document, which is hundreds of pages, but you can scroll through and attend to the specific sections you might be interested in. So, for example, mass participation or business developments or environment, whatever this might be. Well, of course, this was a corporate document, although it was developed by academics, including academics, but essentially Grant Thornton, consultancy agency, led the investigation. There are some very important, valuable lessons. And more importantly, as I hinted in my presentation yesterday, understanding impact of any event, including running events, is a form of public audit, which compares what has been promised before we introduce the event and what was actually delivered. So from that point of view, a very important precedent was set up.
But that's sometimes tricky with the data and a lot of evaluations because sometimes, and with the legacy, sometimes it stays somewhere at the bookshelves and we don't see the implementation actually in practice in the following year or in the next decade, etc. So it's important to do a follow-up that is tangible. And when we are speaking about sustainability, nowadays the focus a lot is on the environmental sustainability. Which is even more tangible to measure the impact of the environmental sustainability if you apply it in your organizational processes. But what about societal sustainability? What about the governmental sustainability? How do we shift the focus towards the other elements of sustainability? United Nations have the 2030 global agenda with 17 sustainable development goals. How do we do it for sports?
Well, this indeed is a critical question, and as you rightfully pointed out, I'm afraid that we have been interpreting sustainability we've been using a rather reductionist approach to sustainability, and we tend to look mainly at the environmental dimension of sustainability. And I don't need to tell you that there are 4 pillars to sustainability, including the economic, the environmental, the societal, and the governance dimension of sustainability. And when we put these 4 pillars together, they link or correspond directly with the idea of social impact. The very expression sustainable development is actually made up of 2 parts. The first one is sustainability. So what is this we need to sustain? We all need to answer this question. When we put together running events or any other sporting events, we need to be very clear. What is this we would like to sustain? And what is this we would like to develop? And for those of you who will be familiar actually with the idea of sustainable development, it emerged in order to ameliorate the chaos caused by economic growth and progress. For many years, our thinking and policies were dominated by economic growth and the gross domestic product. We only tended to use the GDP as a measure of development. And interestingly enough, it was two bright minds, one from Pakistan, Al-Haq, and the Amartya Sen from India, who developed the counterpart to economic development, which we now call the Human Development Index, which was developed precisely in order to sensitize us about the moral dimension that we're missing in the whole exercise. The same applies to running events in sport. So we need to answer very clearly what we mean by sustainability, what is this we would like to sustain. And there is a general agreement that there are three key elements that we would like to sustain. The first one is nature, which includes the natural environment and the ecosystem. And running events, as my colleague and friend Jordan mentioned earlier, they take place in urban environments and sometimes in the nature. So we absolutely have to make sure that when we intervene with nature, we sustain this nature. We don't really cause any damage or harm to the environment. The second is the life support. The second important element we need to sustain is the life support. And the third, of course, is the community. And more specifically, the institutional dimension and the social capital, which we can expand on. When we look at development and social impact, again, referring to the talk yesterday, impacts are results of visions. And those visions are always developmental. Because we would like to see something develop. For example, we develop people, communities, groups, organizations, a city, economy. It's all about development. And every time we mention the word development, we enter into a relationship whereby it's intentional, whereby one agency sets out to develop the capacity of another agency. If you read any strategy of any sport organization, including the sustainable strategy of World Athletics, this is what you see. Intentions to develop the capacity of national federations, of women in particular. There is a strong emphasis on gender and women. So we need to be very clear what is this we would like to develop, to sustain and to develop. And I'm afraid this answer is always contextual. We can only provide a meaningful answer if you take the specific context into account. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to come up with.
Which brings me to the point that I had very interesting actually discussion yesterday here over the coffee, real coffee.
Which we're still lacking.
Where actually we agreed that sometimes for sports organizations who are not yet there when it comes to the sustainability implementation, most of them, sometimes it's important just to start by doing self-assessment, to know where you are when it comes to the any types of the sustainability implementation or change. So that's kind of a reminder, so not only to understand, but also to start self-assessing where you are with getting there where you want to be. So climate change is not anymore a threat, it's a crisis. This is how we like to call it nowadays. However, there are so many emerging crises all around the world. And we saw with the COVID, with the pandemic, that somehow the sustainable development, which was the topic of all the politicians across the industries, also in sports, somehow it was marginalized. How to avoid losing the sustainable development, sustainability as a topic, as a priority topic in case of some other crisis that could pop up. How to avoid, how to make sure that it's still, we're still on the road towards 2030 or whatever is a finish line for the humanity.
I mean, I don't really think that we need the United Nations sustainability goals in order to, as individual organizations or community, to subscribe to this thinking. Because the reason that of any organization is actually to sustain itself. Any business, this is the core idea, the core mission of any business or any organization, to sustain themselves. So in order to do that, you need to develop your capacity. You need to control your growth. you need to be able to obtain and utilize resources. So sustainability should be an inseparable, an essential characteristic of the thinking and the structure of any entity. I don't think that we should refer to sustainability as an outside goal, if you like, an external goal that we need to aspire to. And because it was quantified somehow by the United Nations into those 17 sustainable development goals, which are actually a very good guide. And interestingly enough, if you look at the strategies of many sport organizations, international sport organizations in particular, and the IFC, you will see that they haven't actually subscribed to several of those important sustainable development goals.
And if we have a checklist, for instance, like checklist of 3 key points, checkpoints for sports organization, event organizer to cross when doing preparations towards the event, what would be your key checkpoints, basically? When it comes to the, for instance, you can compare it towards the governmental sustainability or societal sustainability. It doesn't have to be environmental one.
Perhaps the first point is to ask ourselves, or any organization ask themselves, whether they have sustainability on their radar in any shape or form. In any shape or form, because you can use different terms to define sustainability, but any organization should be able to say, yes, we have a clear sense of who we are and where we would like to be, how we are going to sustain our development. The second one is to have structures and sound structures and process in place, which are absolutely essential for any institution to exist in the first place. And the third one is the governmental dimension, which you have referred to on several occasions. I would like to ask colleagues in the audience, with a show of hands, how many of your events or organizations actually subscribe to the industry standard ISO 20121? Hands up. This is very interesting. The ISO 20121 was the industry standard for event sustainability that was first established in relation to the London Games, and the LOCOG, the organizing committee of the London Games, was the first organization to certify itself to meet this standard. This standard sets out very clear requirements for event organizers, sustainability, environmental requirements. Second question, if I may. How many of your organizations do have a code of good governance or subscribe to some sort of a code of good governance? Well, of course, World Athletics and in India, I believe. Okay. Maybe a couple of organizations. Ask yourself why. Good governance, we can criticize this concept as much as we like, but the fundamental idea is that you cannot achieve sustainability if you don't have sound governmental structures and principles in place within your organization.
I have one question for the audience, because I would like also to see more hands raised up. So you mentioned that the first checkpoint on the checklist is to have sustainability on the radar, right? To have it, to understand that it's important, and to have it in the planning for the next General Assembly to be maybe discussed. So how many organizers here, how many organizations here have the sustainability on the radar? Well, it's pas mal.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thank you very much.
But it's interesting how you actually interpret sustainability. It's in relation to the environment, fine. But how about the economic aspects or the social aspects, and equality in particular, equality and inequality? I can give the UK as an example. If you look at the current sports strategy in England, it has equality or inequality at the center, at the heart of developing sport. Because finally, after many years of talks and deliberations in the UK, we have admitted that if we don't tackle inequality, we're not going to achieve great progress in sport participation and the health outcomes that we are hoping to achieve. The same applies to running events. We're talking about the democratization of the running events, the mass participation, but again, it's an issue of opportunities, of access, and of equality. Absolutely fundamental issues.
And before we move to the final stage when we would like to give the opportunity to people to maybe ask questions, from your experience, how long is the period from having something on the radar to actually signing up for the standards or applying the framework in the organizational processes?
This is a very individual question, and in relation to governance, for example, many governments, including the UK government, actually regulates this very heavily. In the UK, the deal is very simple. If you are a sport organization which receives public funding, you must, it's non-negotiable, you must subscribe to the Code of Good Governance, which includes some sustainable environmental dimensions. With respect to sustainability, I believe each organization needs to decide on their own what will be appropriate, how they interpret sustainability, how they would like to see themselves sustained and develop over time. And this is strictly contextual and individual. You cannot really mandate, you cannot tell organizations. And it's an issue of capacity. First and most of all, it's an issue of capacity. So we also need to ask ourselves how we use those running events in different shapes and forms in order to enhance capacity, individual, organizational, community capacity. A reference was made yesterday and the day before about social capital, which is at the heart of this discussion. It's about capacity.
And my question would be, can capacity be enhanced top-down, or it has to come bottom-up? But let's leave the opportunity to maybe our audience to ask the questions to the professor, or to join the coffee, if there are any.
Still waiting for the coffee. Chris.
Microphone is real and it's on the way.
He's got a mic. He's privileged. I believe he's gonna. Oh, he's okay.
It's Chris. You can see from here.
Thank you both of you. So Alessia and myself have been scrambling madly to get the coffee for you, but there's a delay. It'll be delivered when you come off the stage. Thanks for the great insights. Prof, I'm interested at the start, you spoke about London, and so many of those major events have a host city agreement. My sense is that very much in our industry, there's very few events that would have anything coming close to a host city agreement, and we're much more tenants is the term that I use rather than partners. So there's this kind of year-to-year thing where I renew the rent with the city by getting a permit, and we have this almost adversarial relationship, and I see it and I've experienced it myself in some places where we fight so hard to get our permit, and much of that comes from some of the discussion we had yesterday where event organizers don't come with this approach of what problem can we solve for the city. It's more, I've got a product to sell you, like Asahi was saying, I'm bringing my marathon, I'm bringing my triathlon to you, rather than this host city type of agreement that goes on an ongoing basis. Have you got any comments on that, or any examples of events that do, and maybe even Mike can comment. Obviously Chicago Marathon's got a great relationship with the city, but more of a formalized ongoing host city relationship than a year by year, I'm going to renew the lease, so to speak, as a tenant.
And maybe to build up on this, because you also work for Sochi, right?
Yeah.
So maybe if you can make a parallel, I mean, London, Sochi, Chicago.
Thank you for your question, Chris. Partnerships are notoriously difficult to establish and maintain, as we all know, because different parties will have different interests, and very often they scramble for the same resources. In relation to the London Games, there have been some success stories, and I'm afraid a lot of serious challenges and issues. And by the way, okay, I'm not going to mention this, but the official parlance that was adopted by the organizing committee at the time was that you cannot use the word issues, okay? It was only about challenges. You were only allowed to talk about challenges. because they carry more positive connotations. Obviously, you aspire to overcome a challenge as opposed to you have to deal with issues. Sport was one of the, mass participation sport was one of the victims of the Olympic Games, I'm afraid, because despite all the rhetoric and data and all the rest, if you look at what actually happened, a promise was made before the Games that no public funding for sport will be diverted to support the Games. And this is precisely what happened. £500 million of funding for community sport was actually spent on supporting the Games. And when the chair of Sport England, Derek Mapp, raised the question, yes, you have guessed it, he got fired. That was not necessarily a great example of partnership, but the same applies to the legacy. There was a legacy board that was established with the view precisely to coordinate the efforts in order to deliver all of the promises. And guess what? In the space of 7-8 years, this board met only once. Only once. So they were unable to really come up with anything meaningful. But of course, they were successful partnership, particularly at local level. Local authorities with sport organizations in enticing and involving local population in different activities. Plenty of examples. Great examples of cooperation between universities, particularly Sheffield, for example, Sheffield Hallam with the organizing committee. We don't have time to go into details, but there were a number of very successful examples. The same with Sochi, by the way. And one of the legacy of the London Games, and that's why I mentioned the Sheffield Hallam, they developed a program specifically for students becoming sport journalists. So they were able to extend this program as part of the knowledge transfer of the IRC program to Sochi and further on.
Thank you very much. We might have time if we want to hear from Chicago's experience, or if we want to pick up one more question. I guess
there is a hand there.
Okay, sorry. There is a hand. Sorry. So you can.
Can I just ask what you meant by life support? Can I ask what you meant by life support?
By life support?
Yes.
Yes, life support is about the ecosystem. It's about equality and equal opportunity. Yeah, this is what life support is about. And obviously children, we start with children. If you read different policy documents and literature, typically you will find ensuring sound and healthy childhood, and then equality and equal opportunities. And the ecosystem is part of the life support, the whole ecosystem. Yeah. Yes, please.
You said that you recommend us to sign the certificate ISO 2121.
Yeah.
Don't you mean that it's much better for every event organizer to see what they can do in their own environment to see what sustainability in their city and in their environment means than signing an ISO norm that maybe doesn't fit in every single aspect to their event?
You're absolutely right, but this is the industry standard and has been established since 2012, 10 years now. And the last time I checked, there were probably about 56 countries that have adopted or signed up to this standard. But you're absolutely right. Small events, they won't have the capacity. Besides, actually purchasing the document, signing up for the document is pretty expensive in itself. So you really need to have the resources, once, and secondly, the capacity, to be able to deliver on all those different, so you can actually be certified as meeting the standards.
If I just speak for us as Mainova Frankfurt Marathon, we're doing, we're having our green event since 2004 and focus on sustainability long time ago, even if it wasn't on the agenda for other events. But for us, it's not affordable to sign an ISO certificate like that. So doesn't make sense.
You don't need to do that. As long as you can demonstrate that what you're doing with regards to sustainability and the environment, and you can properly communicate that, I think that's perfectly fine. You don't necessarily need to have the badge of the ISO to say, okay, we are the most sustainable event.
But there's no badge or anything provided by like World Athletics or any other
there are
to show that there are sustainable events in the World Athletics family.
Well, again, I'm afraid, yes, you're asking for to put in place another, to institutionalize the process and to put in place another standard. And this is for the governing body to actually decide. And remember, again, okay, you will put in place this standard, but it needs to be administered and policed, which is, again, is a matter of resource.
We're going to Chicago, who also has something to... or not. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Just a second, because I raised the hand just in order to mention something, because I saw Alessio, and I think that especially for the elite and platinum label competitions, so let's say the superior level competitions, there should be some guidelines, because I know we come from different environments and different backgrounds, and we might not all in terms of race organizers or race owners understand all the aspects. But I give you an example. For us, when we switched to the elite label, we were somehow surprised, and we needed to understand how big is the gap that we need to cover in terms of, let's say, emergency medical conditions that the race needs to cover. It could be the same in terms of sustainability if the races that acquire a superior label will at least get some guidelines towards some aspects that they need to cover and solve in their approach of organizing the race, then immediately that will become much more practical for us than going to a very bureaucratic and standardized process like ISO.
So that could be the last reflection. No, we can have just the last reflection from...
And I can mention that for Alessio as well. I think that's spot on, and I think there's some development that's taken place from World Athletics based on certain standards to be included when it comes to environmental sustainability. So to your point, I think it's going to be available. There's so many different associations as well. We work with the Council for Responsible Sport. We've reached the evergreen level and status, and there's other levels and status that you can't achieve. It does help in terms of signing up for some of these associations to give us those guidelines to be able to help us, one, to track and measure, and two, to make sure that we're following certain guidelines to help create that checklist per se. There's other different type of associations that can be more affordable and available to smaller organizations like us versus something at the level like the Olympics or World Championship that might have to subscribe by. And just real quick, and one final comment, when it comes to social integration and cohesion, those are things from our city and those relationships that we do. We ask those questions in terms of what are some of those challenges that our city has, and then how can we help support that, whether it's from an environmental standpoint, accessibility, education, and health. And so we all work together to see how our events can incorporate those to help come up with those solutions, the shared solutions through our events to meet their objectives as well.
Alessio, it will be your call if we keep people away from the real coffee, or...
Just 30 seconds to address Daniel's point. World Athletics has guidelines for race organizers now, and there are different levels of commitment based on the label. Yeah. So there is a different set of things you have to do based on the label you have.
I understood that at least while we were researching for that last year, they were not mandatory, but they will become rules that the competitions need to cover in terms of getting the label, isn't it?
Yes, that is correct. 23 is a pilot year, will be mandatory from 24. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as we heard, we have a lot of things that we can wrap up and put in a pocket when we go after this coffee. But is there a key word you want audience to take away from discussion?
Well, a key word. I mean, it's really hard to think about a single key word, but It's integrity, and I believe later today we'll talk about integrity. So as a person, as an organization, as a community, you need to have integrity. And if we relate this integrity to sustainability, for example, you need to demonstrate this integrity throughout everything you do.
My key takeaway is that even after success like London experience was, this can threaten mass participation towards. So sometimes we have to be careful how we apply sustainability across the industries. Thank you for the time, Professor. It was an honor.
Thank you.
And thanks organizers for this virtual coffee. Please join the real one.
So finally we'll get the coffee, right?
Yes, finally. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for that session. Oh, am I on? Switched on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Folks, just a quick one. It's great to see so much discussion, and we've purposely allowed these sessions to run a little bit longer. So with your permission, we will go straight through the coffee break. There's coffee at the back. Let's just keep rolling because we feel that with so much engagement and content, we'd rather have the content. You can network over the lunch break and we'll just keep rolling. Is that okay with everyone? Yep? Okay, so coffee in the back if you'd like to get it, and we'll move on to the next session.
All right.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank you. And we're running out of time. So if you would like to get a coffee, please join to get a coffee and come back here to continue to the interview. And I would like to let you know that as we have the schedule on time, so the questionnaire would be, Q&A would be ready for all of you because the speaker will be all around. We can keep in touch later after the speaker presentation. And next we go to a very interesting topic is the need of integrity, and welcome Brett Cotier, Head of Athletic Integrity Unit. Please welcome Brett. May I have a big round of applause?
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you everybody. It's really great to be here in Bangkok. Very excited for the race this evening. I'm Brett Clothier, Head of the Athletics Integrity Unit. So we are the independent body set up by World Athletics to govern and regulate the integrity of the sport. And one of our key functions is anti-doping, which I'll speak to you about today. This first slide describes why we have a really big doping problem in the marathon, in road racing. Let me explain it to you. So, normally, the Athletics Integrity Unit is funded by World Athletics. We get $8 million a year for them, and part of that funding is to protect the integrity of the very top races, the gold medal, the podium finishes at the Olympics and the Athletics World Championships. So our anti-doping program, usually for all of the athletics events, is an out-of-competition testing program that we run for the top 10 ranks basically in the world, male and female, for all of the different events. Top 10 men and women in the 100, 200, 400, 800, high jump, long jump. That's who we're focusing on for the out-of-competition testing program. So the out-of-competition testing program, those top 10 athletes form part of what's called our registered testing pool. They're the athletes who provide us their whereabouts, and we can test them every day of the year out of competition in their preparation for their major races. And that's what we do. The way the system works is that the national anti-doping agencies, the domestic anti-doping bodies, they focus on the athletes below our very top tier, below our registered testing pool. And in most events there's a diversity of countries involved. The national anti-doping agencies each add their fair share, and we get a reasonable coverage to protect the podium finishes at the Olympics or the World Championships. But in the marathon, in the road race, this structure is completely disrupted by the fact that we don't really just have the Olympics or the World Championships that we're concerned about. We have, in fact, hundreds and hundreds of very lucrative, well-paying road races around the world who are paying thousands, hundreds and hundreds, in fact thousands, of professional athletes to run and compete in these races. So the further issues compounding this problem is that 80% of those athletes come from just 2 countries. So the national anti-doping agencies in those countries trying to eat into this, you can see the big white bottom part of the pyramid here, they can't get into that far into that pyramid under their normal funding arrangements at all. The other thing that compounds it is that the top runners only can usually race in 2 races a year, unlike the 100 metres, 200 where they can race all year long. You know, so we have this real unique set of circumstances that applies only to the road, only to the marathon, that completely destroys the usual structural framework of anti-doping. So this is the problem a few years ago we had to solve. This is what it created, in fact, is an alarming stat like this one that came in, hope you can read that in red, that came in 2019. 75% of the podium finishers back then from gold label races were never tested out of competition. So not only were they never tested, they knew they were never going to be tested because they weren't in an out of competition testing pool. They weren't giving their whereabouts to anybody. So this was a real big problem. We spoke to World Athletics about it. World Athletics, through its label program, came up with the solution, which is for all the races as part of the program, the athlete representatives and the athletes themselves, through a small percentage of the prize money, to fund an out-of-competition testing pool. So what we have is a much better situation now, where instead of going into 2023, instead of just the very top of that pyramid only, a very small portion, being out of competition tested, next year we're going to have a large professional pool of runners, 300 strong, 150 men and 150 women in this out of competition testing pool. A much stronger situation. But still, we still have a significant chunk of white here in this pyramid. The good news that we've received in the last couple of weeks, because we've been making a lot of cases coming out of Kenya, we've managed to secure a promise of additional funding from the Kenyan government to fund their national anti-doping agency. This funding promise is for an additional $5 million US over at least 5 years to go into anti-doping in Kenya. This is a huge, significant amount of money. Right now, today, the Kenyan anti-doping system is funded with $2.8 million per year in total. So this is going to make almost a 3-fold increase for anti-doping in Kenya. So this funding will make a huge dent, in Kenya at least, in this untested pool of runners. This is really, really important. Even when we're controlling the very top of the tree, in my team at the anti-doping, at the Athletics Integrity Unit, those runners are under immense pressure from the athletes below them who aren't in our pool. That's because of the huge financial incentives, the incredible depth of talent that exists in Kenya. The athletes at the top who are under our control are really under immense pressure from the athletes who are coming at them from below in this pyramid. So the additional funding in Kenya is really going to be a game changer in that country. It will make the pyramid look a lot more like this, which gives us a great platform to really address this problem It's not the end of the solution. There's a lot of hard work to come, but this is now going a long way to fixing the structural problems that previously existed. So, now I want to talk about what we actually do with this funding that we get from the industry, that we get from the government, and how it actually makes an impact. Just a quick recap, the Integrity Unit is an independent body. We're separate from the commercial interests of World Athletics through amendment to the World Athletics Constitution. We're operationally independent. I have an independent board that I report to. We don't have any reporting lines through the through World Athletics. And World Athletics was the ones that set this up and amended their constitution, which can only be changed with a 2/3 majority to unpick any of this. So our approach when we're doing anti-doping, it's not just about extra money for extra tests. It's not a numbers game of just doing lots and lots of tests. The way we operate is all founded on the importance of intelligence. Intelligence-led testing, intelligence that relates to investigations, intelligence relates to how we manage cases once we uncover them, and also intelligence gives us the focus for our education programs that we have to run. This is a really important part of our methodology, that when we get funding, it's just not going money into more tests in a numbers game. Intelligence is at the heart of everything we do, and this is how, in our programs, we manage to catch very high-level cheaters. The results over the last 5 years since our creation in 2017 speak for themselves, and this both on the road and on the track. We can actually uncover doping and doping networks as they happen at the highest levels of our sport, not just in terms of the athletes themselves, but also in terms of the administrators and the support personnel behind the athletes. I think the sport is starting to restore some credibility over the last few years thanks to these efforts in anti-doping. People realise that no news isn't good news when it comes to anti-doping, and they're looking for credibility from our sport, and that's what we're giving them through our programs. So, the funding for the anti-doping program for the road races, we report on exactly make an accountability of how we use the money, our results from the program. This reporting is available on our website. It's very important to us to be accountable to the program funders. One thing I want to talk about is education, just for a few moments before we move to any questions. We're not just in the game of going from case to case to case. We want to make a difference to the sport and to the anti-doping situation in East Africa. We do this through making the structural changes I talked about, seeking funding from the governments as I talked about, but also most importantly through educating the athletes. We need credibility to really start with the education. It's hard to try to convince athletes not to cheat if we're not able to actually help them by catching the cheats. So we've got to that point now, and now we're really making a big focus on education. In the local languages in East Africa, Amharic, Swahili, Oromo, etc., we're conducting many online direct education sessions, which have been really well received. There's been an absolute lack of appropriate education in Kenya and Ethiopia. And when we go to fill this void, we're really getting a strong reception from the athletes. It's very, very encouraging what we're seeing so far. We're also doing some really interesting innovations in the education space. First of all, in our online sessions, a real goal of ours is to have two-way conversations with the athletes, not just talk to them about what the rules are, but hear from them about what their problems, what they perceive to be the solutions and how we can help them. And we're also connecting directly with the East African athletes in 2 pilot projects, one for Ethiopia, one for Kenya. In their local languages and dialect, we're doing something called Education on Demand. We're using Telegram in Ethiopia, WhatsApp in Kenya for these groups. It's allowing the athletes, wherever they are in the world, to ask questions, anything about their supplement, medication, clarification of the rules. It's really fostering. We have people available on this app to answer their questions. It's also fostering a peer-to-peer learning environment. We're using storytelling also to keep the momentum going on the app. Once a week we put in scenarios for discussion and information that generates a lot of strong feedback from the athletes. The conversations that are actually going on in these groups with the very best athletes in the world, you know, Kipchoge, Bekele, they're all part of these groups and are interacting with their fellow athletes on a weekly basis. It's very, very encouraging to us. So here are some more details of the program. It's a balance of, as it says there, providing information, actually engaging with the athletes, especially in terms of topics about their values, and providing support where they need it. So that was all from me from today. Happy to take any questions about our program, anti-doping in general, and the situation in the marathon.
Good morning, and thank you for this very informative presentation. I got a question. To me, it seems we have 2 interests aligned. We have the interest of the athletes in Africa and some other parts of the world, and we have the interest of the events who want to have a very competitive field with new records every time. So these 2 incentives and interests are so strong that doping keeps popping up, because the demand is there and the payoffs are so big for the events and the runners. So I don't see why or how your efforts, which are great, can make long-term impact if these other 2 forces are so strong, and even with new funding, I don't see how you can overcome those.
Okay, well, I'm thankfully a little bit more optimistic than you. You know, I think in every sport we have an incentive to perform, and that's what sport is. So the money that's in the sport, you know, isn't a problem unless there's a structural imbalance. You need the appropriate funding for integrity to match the financial incentive, and this is the same in every sport around the world, no matter what it is. And no matter what the integrity problem, we have the same. You know, there are serious integrity problems in match fixing, in football, tennis, other sports. Where it gets out of whack is where the financial incentive to cheat far outweighs the financial resources or incentives on the court or on the pitch. And that's why, as an example, match fixing attacks lower level matches. Okay, do you understand? So the whole thing is to bring why these structural changes are important is to bring the balance to something like reasonable. It's a never-ending, challenge. It's never going to be. We're never going to eradicate doping. There's always going to be this doping, but we can reduce it significantly thanks to these structural changes. I truly believe that.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brett Pothier. Thank you. All right, and then we are moving faster to the next presentation. It's a transformative approach to mass participation sport. And for this presentation, I'm going to give it up to Novana Vukasinovic.
Is it work?
I'm learning how to use the clicker. So we want our events to be among the communities. We want our events to be to build the communities. We want our events to be the community. We don't want you don't want to build the event that is there on the stage. You want to build the event that is among the people, that is with the people, that is built for the people. And what is going to be the topic of today's discussions and exchange? The topic is going to be actually, I'm going to share some case studies and some tips and tricks on how we can actually enhance the attractiveness, the longitudinous and importance of the events that you are organizing. We're going to discuss and share how event organizers, how you can chase the social importance among the decision makers, among the public sector, and among the communities and citizens. And what we said, we don't want to have a Christmas type of event, something that happens as a one show, something that happens biannually, or that you have to wait for it every 2 years. We would like to discuss today how to make sure that your event stays among the community, stays among the people all year long, basically. But before we do that, I would like to introduce myself, basically, just briefly. It's the second time that I'm coming on the stage, but I'm actually feeling that I'm part of the community. And my name is Nevena Vukašinović. People like to refer to me as someone who is connecting the dots. People like to refer to me as a specialist for strategic partnerships and communications. Somebody who is behind the strategic partnerships and communications. So usually I'm not on the stage, I'm behind. And I've been born and raised in Belgrade, in Serbia, but I'm living in Brussels. And I have been working across different continents, but also I have been working across different industries, cross-sectorally, and with diversity of stakeholders. So I've been working for the NGOs, but also I'm working for the European Commission, so EU institutions, as well as the UN agencies. I've been working with grassroots sports. But I also have worked for the Olympics. I have been working for different brands and the tech and private sector, but I also work for the government. And I wanted to tell, first of all, how honored I am to be in Thailand and how grateful I am for the opportunity to actually be among this community of runners. And thanks very much, Chris and Alessio, as well as Marco from the European Athletics, for giving me this opportunity to be with you today. And why is that? Is because I have been a runner once upon a time, and I wanted to tell you, before we dive into my suggestion for your way of enhancing the importance of the events to last all year long, I want to tell you where I've got the inspiration from. So basically, I was winning the laps around the school at the primary school, and the teacher said to me and to my parents, she should go to compete at the biggest stadium in Maracana in Belgrade. You should bring her on Sunday there. And my mom said, yes, sure, let's do it. And we hopped on the public transportation. Belgrade doesn't have a metro. Bangkok is very lucky to have it. And we were in public transportation, hoping that we will make on time for my race. And then what happened, there was a short of electricity. We needed to hop off, and there was a traffic jam. So basically, it ended up that my mom and myself, we were running towards the race that I was supposed to run at the competition at the Red Star Stadium. So we were almost without the breath, coming just before the 400 meters race was about to start. And and I ran the race and I won the race. And I remember I had a man's hand on my shoulder saying, I really like how you did it. And I was, without the breath even. My mom was still without the breath as well. He said to me, you should also race another race. There is the next one on 60 meters. So he actually signed me up and put me in the lineup for the next race. So I was running after 400 meters and winning that race. I was running also 60 meters short race, and I won that one as well. And then this man came back to me, put his hand on the shoulder, said, I really want to be your coach. I want you to come to run for Red Star Belgrade, which was an honor for me because I'm a big supporter. And that was my multiplying effect of the community that was supporting, perceiving the value and the importance and then supporting my path further. And some of the girls who had this chance to have a multiplying effect in Serbia, they reached the stars, like Ivana Španović here in the photo. Some others managed to create the running businesses across the country, across the cities, and to engage the city communities around the running experience. But what can we apply to multiply the effect of your events? And I'm not going to talk here about about something that you don't know, because I want to underline that everything is out there. So you have a lot of data that is out there that you can use in your argumentation, negotiation with the institutions and with the public sector. Public sector itself is already prioritizing, based on this data, different activities, campaigns, and policies. So the World Health Organization, for instance, they already are having campaigns that your event can just line up with. Cities, like City of Paris, is already trying to enhance the experience with the participants by, as you know, booking the first ever race that will happen together so elite racers will be running together with the citizens. You have a number of initiatives that are already taking place and accumulating this effect of ripple effect of influence of sports towards the communities across the basically countries and regions, etc. So you don't have to do much. You just have to make sure you map the opportunities out there. And then how to gather this traction when speaking with the institutions is, you have the information, but you then plan your strategy doing not business as usual. So, for instance, if you have idea that is good but is not buzzing enough, then you try to put the implementation of the events under the linking it with a purpose, or linking it with the immersive experiences. If you have data in your country that are showing there is a massive problem, that is a problem in a specific community, you then bring this community to be part of your campaign, about a part of your events, a part of your annual planning and implementation. What can we do to multiply the effect? What I do usually throughout the consultancies I'm working with, I use the 3 medals rule, basically, and I will explain to you how we are doing it. So you can either choose one of those 3, or you can apply all 3 of them. That would be the best, of course. So basically, you have a communication expert, you have a strategy expert, you have a bidding expert in your organization, you have event planner, etc. But make sure that either you have an additional person or the task is aligned with one of your experts, somebody who will be making sure that you are aligning planning with the existing policy of the public authorities. So make sure that actually the planning of your events or the side events that you are planning to organize are actually aligned with the policy of either the public institutions or the governments. So in that sense, you will be actually following, so your tagline will be their key topics as well. Second medal, so second application rule could be that you use 360-degree approach. What does it mean? It means that you basically don't lose sight of all those different stakeholders that should be part of your event. So volunteers, fans, youth, so not only as spectators, but actually becoming the implementators of your events. So 360-degree approach is absolutely maybe my favorite actually medal rule. And third one is making sure that purpose is the part of why you are doing the event. So that's the purpose is the part of your why and how, basically. It is definitely not a buzzword, but purpose should be the way how you are implementing things. And again, the timing is your key player. So when you are planning your whole year event and activation, you can also separate milestone moments throughout the kind of flagship moments of the country where you're hosting the events. So you can link it to the key dates, you can link it to the key policy moments, and in that sense you can make it important and attractive to the stakeholders you're engaging with. And how I will here show you a couple of case study examples how I was doing it with different public authority representatives. So this is the Green Sports Hub Europe, which we have funded with the seed support from the European Commission. And we brought in basically stakeholders coming from a variety of sectors. So we brought in stakeholders coming from sports, cities, youth as well. We brought in sustainability actors, but we also brought in brands. And we created a platform as a one-stop shop for sustainability in Europe. Then for the UEFA, we have connected the policy, super important topic, which is climate change and European Green Deal agenda, with the powerful network and community and influence of the UEFA's events. And we created videos and campaign that will be lasting for the next 2 years with the hashtag Every Trick Counts. As Serbia has lost yesterday, I'm not going to play the video that actually was showing football, so I will skip this one. Further on, European Commission has came pressured by the ministries of education and sport across Europe, plus Turkey, plus Israel, plus a couple of other countries that are outside the European continent, basically, and said, look, we have a problem. Data are showing that the obesity is increasing, that the situation is really not good. What shall we do? We understood, we analyzed the data, we analyzed the stakeholders they can engage, and we created firstly a week called Be Active Week, where the aim was to make more people moving more often all around Europe. But then this European Week of Sport actually became a whole year event with year after year increase in numbers, and this year we just had the 8th year anniversary of the European Week of Sport, which is a great example of the cooperation with the funding between sports stakeholders, grassroots governments, and the pan-regional institutions. That's another example, which is we have the International School Sport Federation, who has came to us and said, look, the priority of a couple of countries we are targeting, like France, like Belgium, like Latin America, like Brazil in Latin America, like Nordic countries, is gender. Somewhere it's very well, so girls are very well educated and included. Somewhere it's not working well. what shall we do? So for them, we created a run, so she runs, where you have young leaders coming from all around the world and running across the cities, but that is also having a support and follow-up of the educational programs that is running between two runs that are happening every year. I don't know if I click now here, but you can actually see the video how it was in Paris. Brussels. So we brought girls from Paris to Brussels, then to Latin America, then to Nordic countries, where they created a healthy community, engaged community. After the race, they continue creating projects for their countries on the ground. And we did a follow-up, all with the funding that was secure through the institutions, which is European Commission. For Nike and for their CSR program, they also got a data where what they like to say, this generation is 1.8 billion strong, but the least active in history. And they wanted to enhance the role of the ladies coaches in the empowerment of the physical activity across the nation. So for Made to Play Nike, we did immersive campaigns where we engaged different influencers, where we engaged the grassroots workers with youth and with kids. And this campaign is still lasting and started already 4 years ago. They also made here, this is the example of the industry infused money in private money infused in the sports sector as well. So basically, to kind of wrap up, what are the key tips? So when you use the 3 medals rules, each of them can also be shaped by the use of partnership of stakeholders. So make sure that the event that you're planning to last all year long is actually a multi-stakeholder partnership, and as well cross-market partnership is possible. Make sure that the leadership is sustainable, and this is linked to what we were talking about, the organizational sustainability. It would be great that we don't run away from the hybrid ways of doing things, but to use hybrid as an amplifier of the activities we're applying, and to make sure that with impact, with purpose, we'd add the values to enhance the work. Society is definitely, if we engage it in a proper way, it is becoming our community. It's becoming the community that is also becoming attractive for the public institutions. And then it's becoming a way how we can secure additional funding and resources for making our events long-lasting. As mentioned with Nike, as mentioned with She Runs, make sure that you bring in the trusted voices. So to use the community to identify trusted voices that can become your ambassadors or influencers. Immersive is a new orange, so as I was saying throughout the discussions with you and throughout the experience in Bangkok, let's not run away of the need to transform the sports, and especially to transform the fan engagement experience. Let's make it as immersive as possible. What does it mean? It means that we need sports that are actually not only finding solutions and sport events that are finding solutions for the athletes and making the greatest experience ever for the athletes, but actually we have to think how fans and spectators are going to play an active, immersive role in our events. And then again, I want to underline that we need to have solutions that are cross-sectoral, that are not only coming from sports, from one industry to sports, but actually that are looking through across sectors in order to bring the best solutions for our community. And this is my last slide to close with, and it will be closed with a video. One of my favorite videos that is almost a decade old, but it was one of the first things I've been working on, and it is reminding that I always like to say, let's benchmark with your potential stakeholders, with your most important stakeholder, the one who will secure the additional resources and infrastructure. Let's make sure that they feel how important it is to not lose the what-if moment. So sometimes your sponsors will be challenging your purpose. Sometimes you will end up, either you do everything and you make sure that the community finds your event super important, but mindsets don't change across those communities. Sometimes your community is going to push back on your ideas. So make sure that the institutions, the public sector, the citizens that you are partnering with are aware of these potential what-ifs and what is behind them. And let's work towards the success together. And now I guess I press play and you see the video. Sorry for those who already saw it because it is old, but it is gold. Thank you.
I probably would make a time machine.
I would make medicine for the sick.
I'd probably invent something new.
我会赢到5个总冠军戒指。
If I could have an extra 5 years to live.
You said 5, right?
5 years. It's a long time.
I would try to fix everything I did bad.
I would bring my uncle back because I miss him very much.
I would get more hamsters.
I would probably want to go looking for dark matter.
I think I'd go looking for aliens.
If I could live an extra 5 years.
I was thinking about making like a helicopter, like a wooden helicopter, but I don't have any wood.
I want to go check out the moon sometime. I'd probably teach my sister not to hate tuna.
I would try and invent a machine that lets you run at light speed. If I had 5 more extra years to live, I would be the boss of all the chipmunks.
Eu cantaria na frente de 1 milhão de pessoas.
I don't really know. I think I'd do anything. Why are you asking me that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't know if there are questions, but I also know that we need a break, so let me know.
Any question? All right. I think you will be around here and we will answer all the questions later on. And thank you very much. Thank you for the video, the last ones as well. And before we move to the next presentation, just give a little break and let's watch some video before we move to the next one. All right, and I think we skip the video and then we go to the presentation that talk about adapting event offer to meet expectation of today's runner, lesson from the USA, and welcome speaker Christine Bowen, COO from Running USA, and Nori Williamson, technical delegate measurer and consultant from World Athletics. Welcome.
Well, it was supposed to be coffee, and I agree with the professor. And unfortunately, both of us live by coffee, intravenously, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
3 cups a day minimum.
Yeah. Well, it's almost wine time, so...
That's okay, too.
I would like to introduce Christine Bourne, who is the COO of Running USA. And welcome, Christine. And can you maybe tell us something about how USA or Running USA came about and what it is?
Absolutely. And before I do that, I wanted to also say thank you to Alessio and to Chris for having me back. It's been a pleasure over the years to watch the program evolve at this event, and it's always nice to be here with our folks from around the world. So I've been at Running USA for 12 years now, and it's evolved tremendously since I've been there. I started really just working on our conference, which at that point was about a 250-person event, and prior to the pandemic increased to almost 800 attendees from 17 countries around the world. As an organization, we were formed originally to really, alongside USA Track and Field, to embrace the sport of distance running and help get elite athletes to the podium. Fast forward 12 years later, and today we're really a business-to-business organization. We are the trade association for the sport, comprised of members, non-members. I would say 60% of our membership and our following are events from around the country and around the world. Events ranging from Chicago event management to Grandma's Marathon to local 5Ks in the industry. Our role in the industry really is to bring all players from a business perspective together. So if you have a race, I want to bring you into Running USA to teach you best practices and also connect you with all of the vendors and service providers that you would need to put on that event.
And I read that you did some surveys, and in fact since 2007, I think you've been doing surveys of the runners. Now that to me excites me because, you know, first of all, I'm a runner, and secondly because that's our clients. You know, everyone here has a client, whether it's federation or commerce, and the client is the runner. And I don't think we've listened enough necessarily to what the runner wants and what they're going to want. So can you perhaps talk to us about the changes you've seen in the surveys from 2007 to say 2020 before the big upheaval?
100%. We used to be fortunate enough where we had a part-time researcher on staff with us, and we could do very in-depth, detailed reports, such as half-marathon studies, marathon studies. With the changes in privacy policies and data sharing, it's a little bit more challenging for us to get to that granular level of finisher information. So now we have a study called the Global Runner Study. The Global Runner Study is a study that we go out into market through our membership, through our social media channels, and we ask consumer runners questions about their behaviors alongside of running. What's really interesting about the study that we just launched a couple of months ago, the 2022, was, and I would say in all surveys in general, when people take those surveys, they say one thing and sometimes they do another. So, you know, if you look at the 2022 survey, for example, it says that 66% of participants said that they were going to increase their participation going forward post-pandemic. And I think most event organizers in the audience would agree that probably hasn't held true. And so now we're sitting here scratching our heads going, okay, we have this wonderful data, but if people aren't behaving true to that, how do we make decisions about our events? And it, you know, comes back to us to keep reevaluating those questions and really asking ourselves as event organizers, what are we doing to meet the changing needs of those runners and consumers in general?
Yeah, I don't think we do that enough. You know, some examples. Tom Williams earlier on was saying that his drop-off is in lady runners, staying at home, taking the kids to football rather than going to park run. What are you finding?
We're finding the opposite, and as far as our surveys and our data, we know, at least in the U.S., which is the majority of the survey data that we collected this past year, and I should say North America, we use our friends in Canada as well to deploy that survey, that women runners, from what we see, are more apt to do runcations with their girlfriends. They are definitely more interested in that sort of environment. We also saw in the study, which ties into that runners are absolutely willing to travel 100 to 300 to 500 mile distances if it's meaningful, if it's an experience on a long weekend for them to participate in an event.
And that again goes against some of the information we've got on sport and travel. So the potential is definitely there.
I agree, and I feel like there's been a lot that I've sat here this weekend and listened to the different conversations and thought, gosh, in a lot of ways, a lot of this data does contradict itself. And so, and so it's important that we still keep doing it, but, you have to take it all a little bit with a grain of salt, I believe, and, use it to make the best decisions, especially when you're talking about events that are regional and international. What I find in New York City is going to be tremendously different than what we find in Nebraska or in Jacksonville, Florida, or in San Diego, California, for what people are coming to for those events.
What were the trends before the pandemic and building up to the pandemic? How was the industry doing then? We
were great. Like I mentioned, we, definitely not a running boom, but maintaining and very, slow and steady and consistent growth. We found that across our events, and we also found that just across our vendors and suppliers and folks, we're very comfortable. And I think when we were in Las Vegas for our largest conference ever, just weeks before the pandemic hit. And it was very positive, it was very upbeat, and then immediately, my job turned to being part-time therapist for the industry, where my phone would ring, and every week it was a different conversation. Running USA as an organization was asked to, come to, be lobbyists for the industry, and it's incredibly challenging when you are asked to do that because you want to help everyone, but everyone's regional and local governments had different requirements at that time. So the best we could do was really continue to provide best practices, encourage people to collaborate with one another, and lean into the virtual aspect of things, and just continue to evolve from that perspective.
I think you're absolutely spot on. Every region was different, and hats off to Chris. And in fact, that's probably how Chris and World Athletics got together, and that global council has come from that, sharing and working forward. What did you see towards the end of the pandemic? Because you did a survey that came out basically focusing on the pandemic.
We did. Part of our whole Global Runner study is built upon live events happening in person. And, but we didn't want to take a year off. We felt it was really important to look at the data and how consumers were digesting and responding to the world of virtual. Obviously every week, day, month that went by, we were hoping things would go back to normal, as they say. And when we look at that study and that data, they were okay with having the virtual component. They were okay to have something, but they were so eager to get back to in-person events. When you move to the 2022 survey data, it was very evident that some people were still wanting to do that or wanted it as a supplement. A lot of events held on to that and are still having virtual components because it gives them an opportunity to engage in a different way. For me personally, there's nothing that replaces going into and standing in a start corral and going out. But I think it also created, and we heard this a lot, opportunities for people who couldn't be together for travel reasons to feel like they were connected and running together one way, shape, or form through those virtual events.
Yeah. Virtual events, of course, in China were long before the pandemic, and were massive. I mean, you get 30,000, 300,000 people participating in a virtual event long before the pandemic, in Xiamen, for instance. So there is definitely an opportunity there going forward in some in some regions. I actually think the pandemic was good. That's probably quite controversial, but just from the point of view, we wouldn't be having this live broadcast on YouTube. We wouldn't be having all the collaborations worldwide if it hadn't been. And we've been forced, as Tom Williams says, to ask the question, what else is wrong? What else is incorrect, which is great. You've tweaked your survey, though, over the last couple of years to be more inclusive. Can you speak to that?
We have. We realized in the United States that there is a strong desire to, when you look, let me back that up. When you look at our survey data, the respondents were predominantly white. And so 2 years ago, we added into our survey questions that were very specific around diversity, whether it's color of skin, LGBTQ+, athletes with disabilities. We really feel like our events in the United States and just worldwide should be looking at that a little bit more seriously as far as how are you approaching those in your event marketing, in your materials. And it was a little profound because we did actually get, first we looked at the numbers, and when they came back, because we were getting those survey results from our events, which are predominantly white, the results showed that. So it really pushed us as an organization to make a more concerted effort to educate our events, and our programming at our annual conference has really embraced that. And it goes back to the sustainability conversation that we were having earlier about diversity being at the heart of that, first and foremost. I think a lot of times people used to think sustainability was just having a recycling program, and that's not where that really hails from. So we're making strides there, and I think most of our events now, I shouldn't say most, a lot of our events are really implementing programs to make their events be more diverse. And Mike's Chicago Half Marathon is a prime example of that, of going into an underserved community and embracing them and saying, well, what would you like to see, versus us only showcasing the most beautiful parts of our cities and not considering what else might be out there to bring in those communities.
Yeah, it brings back to the whole thing we did yesterday on what is the purpose. Was it yesterday? I've lost time. It could be day one. What is the purpose of the event? What is your purpose and what are your objectives? But you've now got a post-pandemic survey out. What is that telling you? What's your finger on the pulse saying? Where are we going? What should we be aware of?
Well, that's a great question. I'd say consumers' wants have changed. They're looking, for more of an experience. They are looking for things throughout the entire race, throughout the entire course. They're looking for what happens after the event. How are you talking to them, leading up to the event? And I think someone said earlier too that, talking about a year-round conversation with those participants. They really are craving that. They want that feeling and sense of community. So I think, leaning into that a little bit more is probably going to be really important for people going forward.
But that's a segment of the runners. There's still the hardcore hardcore runners who are out there looking to improve their best. I think you're talking 18 to 30, that age group. And you have a case study of one you were telling me about? When they had coffee.
When we had actual coffee, I was sharing, I did this very, very scientific case study of one. It was my 21-year-old daughter. And one of the conversations that I have been asked a lot recently, well, the two conversations are, where are our runners? Why aren't they coming back? And number two is, how do we attract the younger generation? And I've heard that here several times already. So I did it. I called my daughter one day. Actually, I sent her a text message that said, I have a very important question to ask you. Please call me, because you can't get a hold of a college student by calling them on the phone. You have to first send a text message. And if she doesn't respond to that, then I send her a Snapchat and say, check your text message. And that's how she will get back to me. So she called and I said, okay, I have a question for you, and it has to do with my job. And she's like, oh, great, we're going to talk about running. So I said, I know you're skewed because, you've been brought up around road races. You've had the privilege of, kind of going and seeing the elite runners in the front. I said, but, I'm always trying to get you to sign up for races with me, and you never want to do it. Like, what gives? What's going on? I said, I want to know what you and your friends are doing. Tell me what you are doing instead of going to road races. And why you're not going to road races. Like, why wouldn't you go sign up for a super fun 5K? And she was an open book, and she said, well, I'm glad you asked. she said, honestly, she said, I want something, I want instant gratification. I don't want something that I have to train for a long time. She said, for me, I'm more apt to sign up for Orange Theory the night before, give them my $10 deposit, and if I don't show up, they're taking my $10 anyway, so I'm going to show up. She said, I'm looking for accountability and social activities with my friends. She said, so if my friends want to do it, I'll do it too. And the one most profound thing that I heard her say, and I took this very seriously, was she said, I'm afraid of being last. I'm afraid of being too slow. And there's absolutely zero reason for her to feel that way as an active 21-year-old participant, but it was the perception, because she hears the word road race and it intimidated her. And so I think that's something to think about. I took that back to my team, and we thought about, going forward with our conference this year. We always like to try and have some sort of big reveal. And so we embarked on a new study that is going to be, we're in the market with it right now, for 18 to 30-year-olds. So it's Gen Z and a part of millennials. And a little bit of a nod to Alessio here, because World Athletics is helping us with that endeavor. And we're asking a lot of the questions in there, right down to the vernacular of how we're talking to them and where we are talking to them. I can tell you right now, my daughter and her friends, they're not on Facebook. That 18 to 20 or 30-year-old, they're not there. They're on TikTok and they're on Instagram. And that's where she's making her buying decisions, and that's where she's finding her recipes, quite frankly, on TikTok. But that's how they're making their decisions. So that's, if we want to lean into that market, those are the areas we need to start looking at. I had the opportunity a couple of months ago to talk with, again, trying to find answers that I can share with our membership and our community at large. I had the opportunity to talk with the previous marketing manager at TikTok, and he had no background with running at all. But I explained to him my dilemma, and he distilled it down to one key thing that I thought was really interesting, and it had to do with the sport of pickleball. And I'm a huge fan, if you know me, about leaning into other sports and what we can learn from other sports. And he said, stand back and look at pickleball. You need 4 players.
You're talking pickleball?
Pickleball, it's
called.
Pickleball. That's what it's called in the U.S.
In some places it's called paddle tennis.
Okay. He said, if you and I make a commitment to play pickleball together, there needs to be 4 of us. He said, but if you don't show up to play pickleball with me, I can't play. He said, but if it's different with running being so autonomous, that if you say to me, Nori, I'm sorry, I was up too late, I can't go do that 5-miler tomorrow, I'm not stopping you from going. You can still go. So there's that accountability to each other. And how the question that I have is, how do we bring that to running?
And it almost contradicts what your daughter was saying about, I want to run with my friends. So, and the commitment is so late.
Right.
It's a last-minute commitment. Now, to any event organizer, that's a nightmare. Entries on the day, we did that in 70s, 80s, it's fallen away. If you don't commit up front, I can't balance my books.
We can't plan. So how do we figure that out is the bigger question, when we know that behavior has changed. And I don't know that it's ever going back to where people are going to sign up 6 to 10 months in advance for an event. I'm actually seeing it with our annual conference for Running USA. While we've got, over 300 people registered, I look at our numbers and I think, gosh, these are the same event directors that are concerned that people aren't signing up in advance for their races. However, they're not signing up in advance for this.
That's it. So it's full of contradictions. So maybe we've got to look at a 18 to 30-year-old special to attract that segment in that you can only sign up in the last 24 hours. Yeah.
Right, and look for the opportunities, and this is the piece of the study that I'm very excited about, is look for the opportunities to partner. When we can put this study out and show where they are going, whether it's Orange Theory or the Pickleball League, whatever those things are, look for those partnership opportunities with those types of other sports and organizations. I know that with Orange Theory specifically, they had done a partnership at one time with Ragnar Relay, where they had a 24-hour relay race on their treadmills inside the Orange Theory gyms. Highly successful. It was done for charity. You know, maybe there's more of an opportunity in those sorts of environments.
Yeah, and then your daughter was saying she wanted a party afterwards. So event organizers now have to plan for a party that they don't know if anyone's going to turn up to until the finish of the race. But
yeah, I don't. And if, when I say party, she's not looking for drinking. She's looking for a festive environment.
Atmosphere.
For someone at that age, a festive environment can be something as simple as having selfie stations, having a visual wall where they can go and take pictures with a group of what they've just accomplished, and having those things along the course too. I think are really enticing, things that they can engage with the whole way.
And I think, well, as a technical person, I focus on the finish. I want to give the photographers and the media a nice, clean finish. And the most annoying thing is, people coming across the line with, I'm sure it's the same for the photographing industry as well, come across the line and they want to stop with their iPhone and take a selfie. But if you recreate that finish and put it outside, we're able to move people through. So
great opportunity. And one of the things I've heard various times throughout these presentations, the past couple of days, is the finishing times are going down, and it's okay. It's okay if not everyone is passionate just about fast times. There's a place for that. But if we want to bring newer folks into the sport, that's not the solution.
We've got to go there.
You've got to go where they are.
And it's interesting. I mean, South Africa is virtually unique in the world that all our events are done under a federation through a club. You can't have an event unless it's through a club, and the club may contract an event organizer, professional event organizer, etc. And what we're finding is we're having to define the contenders as a separate batch, whereas previously, worldwide, it's tended to be there is an elite, but we're focusing on the mass. And so that talks to that. We can't have the same rules for the elite that we have for the mass, or we can't have the same rules for the mass that we have for the elite. And the more we focus on that, the opportunity to grow the mass is much bigger.
I agree, and one final point around this, when we talked about the pandemic earlier, and people were forced to get very creative, and it's time to be thinking about how we can be creative with our live events as well, because I think there was a tendency to go right back to our same formula that worked before the pandemic, and it's changed.
And I think, your surveys are key to that. What are the problems that listening to the client is key. What are the problems that you're facing, and are they getting harder to get the data, and how do we get around that?
Absolutely. Anytime you do a survey, it's a lift. It's not an easy task. I think people's time is so valuable. People's attention span is shorter. So when we ask our folks to do these sorts of surveys, there's the one we're in market with right now. We had to be very strategic about 9 minutes. It has to be done in 9 minutes. We're lucky to get 9 minutes of time from 18 to 30-year-olds.
That's double the time to enter a race, huh?
That's true. That's true. And then, for us, we're using our members to disseminate some of our surveys, not the particular one that we're in market with right now. They're actually, because we wanted to talk to non-runners. We wanted to know what would make them want to come run. So we didn't use our membership for the survey we're in market with now, but our regular surveys are through our membership, and those people are already running. They're a captive audience. and so we're getting those same results. So it's on us. It's as an organization. It's on Running USA to look for new avenues to be able to reach out to people who aren't already in that active audience.
And why is that getting harder? Why is it the POPI Act and the the Information Act? Is that?
Yeah.
Or is it competition? People scared of giving their data into an open space?
I don't think it's necessarily they're scared of giving their open data. I think the data, and we had this conversation with Jackie from Haku. It tends to, my data and Haku's data, race roster, like they're when you look at it, it's pretty similar across the board when you evaluate it. And we are having issues with being able to privacy policies issues and GDPR and not being able to, kind of have people share the information that they once were okay sharing.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday I think Donna was speaking about the World Marathon Club and the massive, uptake they got in that, in opening that and launching that this year. A global one would help us all, but it would have to be able to be segmented down into regions and countries.
And countries, right.
I'm sure you see it across the states. Some states react one way and other states react other ways to your...
It's true, and a couple of years ago, actually, I don't know if Chris is in the room, but we did, when we were in Singapore, we did a study with Asia. The other piece of this is translations of surveys, and so how we translate and use different words in different countries is challenging. So it's not as simple as just taking one survey and putting it over into another market. Even if you can do the translations, it's what we call things are completely different in general too.
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting future and a big challenge, I think, that we need to throw out to the industry. How do we talk to our clients? What feedback do we get, and what are the opportunities that come out of that?
Sure, because a lot of times, they may ask for things that we just know are not possible, and they're not possible. But I would encourage everyone to reimagine what you are doing a little bit more and think of what is possible.
I think there's a huge opportunity with the likes of Parkrun, which has a global spread, and many of those people don't ever end up in a race. So there needs to be some sort of collaboration. So bringing people together to create a global database. If you took the World Marathon Club and you took the Parkrun database and you were able to merge it. Now that's what, I think you missed it on day one. The talk was all about collaboration and data. That would probably get us the best picture of what the trends are that we as within the sport, either as federation, either as event organizers or suppliers, need to know to plan for that third wave or fourth wave that we're going to have.
Sure, there's getting the database of runners, and then there's also getting the runners to take the actual survey.
Yeah.
Those are two individual challenges.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone out in the audience we've got about 2 minutes left, any questions or any suggestions on two factors. 18 to 30s, how do we bring them in? You've heard what they want. And database, that global database that was being discussed on day one, how do we get it of runners? Any thoughts, any questions?
Hi, thank you for that. I found it incredibly interesting. Just on that demographic 18 to 30, I think you said, something that just sort of popped into my mind that we haven't actually discussed much over the last few days is gamification. So how do we, to your point about going to them, speaking to them their language at their touch points, and it is mostly Snapchat and TikTok. You're right, they're not on Facebook, but how do we incorporate gamification into our events to make them much more attractive, because they're using gamification sort of every day in every aspect of their lives?
That's a wonderful question, and I know a lot of our technology partners with their training apps are offering that, Strava being a prime example. And so, it'd be interesting to have the conversation with someone like Strava, what they're seeing is in that demographic area, and look for those synergies.
Any other questions? Alessio, I saw you. Sorry? Yeah.
Thanks, Christine. I would just like to understand what kind of techniques do you use to keep your member races engaged with you? How do you make sure that they see value in being part of the organization? It's a totally self-interested question here.
No, that's great. We have different levels of membership in our organization, and so once you've sort of come into the ecosystem of Running USA as a member, we make a conscious effort to promote our benefits to you through our newsletters, through social channels, and we have a person on staff who is responsible for member outreach. So we try to make sure that, if we know your event's coming that weekend, we're reaching out and we're saying, good luck, do you need anything? It just depends on, what level you are in, but we are essentially a marketing channel for your event. Some of it does come back on the member to engage with us to say, hey, we have this news that we want to promote, but it's also on us constantly to be looking for new benefits to promote to our members. Obviously, the biggest benefit we hear is people having the ability to come to our Running USA conference with a discount, but we offer different programs such as music licensing, event insurance, working advantage, different things that can help you do your business more efficiently or cost savings as well.
Christine, thanks very much. I think your alliance has been on the go since 1999, so you've evolved quite. COVID caused a lot of countries to start creating those alliances, and you've shown us where it can go to. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I have a big round of applause for Christine Bowen and Nolly Williamson. Thank you very much. Thank you. And this is the early part. Is the morning part of the conference discussions, and I believe that you have learned some lessons from the USA, that they share the idea, inspiration, and the lessons of to run the big event and the mass participation event, the marathon as well. And next we will have a lunch break for everyone. At the same, the meal will provide in the back of the auditorium. And I would like to announce that for the afternoon session, we will start at 2 p.m. on time, at the 2 p.m. on time. So now relax, enjoy, and keep networking to each other, and we'll see you again at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.